Good evening. Welcome to our fourth Sudan Meseleler conference. Before we begin, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here with us today. I am Ece Çelik, and it's my pleasure to walk you through the conference and introduce you to the speakers that are very kind to share their knowledge with us today and enhance our mental horizon. I will briefly explain the translation instructions in Turkish for native Turkish speakers. Merhabalar. Öncelikle 4. Sudan Meseleler Konferansımıza hoş geldiniz. Ben Ece Çelik ve bugün sunucunuz ben olacağım. Türkçe çevirisi opsiyonunu kullanmak isteyen dinleyicilerimiz için Zoom'un alt kısmında Interpretation seçeneğine tıklayarak Türkçe simultane çeviri seçeneğine ulaşabilirler. After clarifying everything in every language, firstly I want to give a little bit of information about our conference. Sudan Meseleler is a seminar series that we organize annually since 2017. It unites the people who are interested in diving and water sports, and it provides the opportunity to listen to the speeches that are given by the experts in related fields. By this seminar series, we aim to create a friendly atmosphere in which we can think and talk about the issues on water and water sports from various points of view. Without any purpose of profit, we afford the expenses of this organization with the support of our university and some local companies. And all the organizational work is done by our members voluntarily. So all our efforts to create a familiar, friendly environment to discuss some issues related to the field, which united us and we all love. We hope that you will enjoy this conference. That being said, now I invite our Executive Board President Sinem Kurnaz to give a speech for us. Sinem, it's your turn.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Sinem Kurnaz. I am the president of Sabancı University Sabakwa Society. Welcome to our fourth Sudan Meseleler Diving Conference, which we organize annually. The primary purpose of this conference is to unite people who dedicate themselves to underwater world and listen to the speeches of our speakers, each with experience and knowledge on different fields of diving. This is the first time in the history of our society SUS that we hold an international event with the participation of people all over the world to share experiences and knowledge for our common passion for diving. Believe me, the coronavirus pandemic, which has made its effect felt all over the world, has negatively affected us and many diving societies here, whose activities are mostly based on physical purposes. But I am sure that all my friends among us did try to minimize these effects of this period by doing their best to not keep diving lovers away from the underwater world. Also, I would like to point out that as SUS, this was the primary purpose and motivation for us to organize this conference online. Today, 3 different speakers, each more valuable than the other, will be with us. I would like to thank each of them in front of you on behalf of myself and my society for not refusing our invitation and for agreeing to be speakers at our conference and sharing their experiences and knowledge with us. I hope you will find our conference prepared by SUS family useful and enjoyable on this very important day for us. Also, I would like to thank to Cem Güneri, Vice President of Sabancı University, for being here with us today. Again, I would like to state that we are happy to see you among us. Thank you.
Thank you for your kind words, Sinem. Now I want to introduce you to our first speakers. Our first speakers are Donald Frey and Orkan Köyasuoğlu. Donald Frey is a retired underwater archaeologist and has been living in Turkey since the mid-1960s. After having his PhD in physics, he moved to Istanbul to teach at Boğaziçi University. In 1969, he began spending his summer breaks as a volunteer on the excavation of a 4th century shipwreck at Yassıada, without knowing that this would lead to a career change. In 1975, he joined the newly formed Institute of Nautical Archaeology, abbreviated as INA, and formed his base along with his family in Bodrum, Turkey, where he lives to this day. Over his career as an underwater archaeologist, he has worked on all major INA excavations in Turkey, as well as the Italian island of Lipari, Mombasa in Kenya, and Jamaica, and has recorded over 2,000 dives. He served as INA's president between 1982 and 1988. His extraordinary photographs have been appeared in publications around the world, including the cover of National Geographic and Archaeology. Our speaker, Orkan Köyasoğlu, on the other hand, will introduce us the present perspective on underwater archaeology in the same session. Orkan is a born sailor who comes from a distinguished family of wooden boat builders. Orkan was born in Istanbul and thereafter moved to Bodrum as a young boy. After earning his master's degree in classical archaeology from Anadolu University, Orkan joined the staff of INA's Bodrum Research Center in 2001. Since then, he has piloted Caroline and participated in numerous INA surveys and excavations in Turkey, Sri Lanka, and Albania. He helped design INA's archaeological research vessel Virazon 2 and served as fleet supervisor. Orkan is presently completing his doctoral degree at Anadolu University. Before giving our speakers the stage now, I want to inform our audience that during the session, the audience will not be able to write into chat and unmute themselves. At the end of the presentation, if you have any questions, you can raise your hand from the reaction section in Zoom, or you can write in the chat. Now, I will give the stage to our speakers.
We unmute ourselves. Hello. Can you hear me? Naz, everything is okay?
Yes, okay.
Great. And you're not seeing the screen though yet, right? We'll share our presentation.
Not yet.
Okay. Is
Yes.
that visible now?
Yes.
Well, yes. So my name is Kristen Beal. I'm actually an assistant professor at Sabancı University, and Naz was one of my former students. And I'm very excited to be here today with my father.
Thank you. I'm happy to be with my daughter.
Yes, and my father turned 85 just this week, and it's his first Zoom conference, and we're very proud. Well, I'm very proud to have him today here. As this presentation for us is kind of going down memory lane. My father's very interesting history that goes back in Turkey back to the 60s. So without further ado, and by the way, we're going to do this kind of not as a very formal talk, but more as a conversation, going over some of the many photos that my father took over his 40-year career. So we will start first with our question of what is underwater archaeology?
Well, what is archaeology, first of all? And that's trying to understand man's past through the remains of his past that we find today. And so you take that underwater, and what can you find from man's past underwater? Well, you can actually find remains of cities, but we're much more interested in the remains of trade, and that will be ships. And you don't find much of the ships because we have teredo worms which eat the wood, but we find the cargoes. And what are the cargoes? Amphoras.
Yeah, amphoras. I think that was our
and that's second. In that picture there, yes.
Sorry, let's see if I can go to the next slide.
Yeah.
Yes, what is an amphora?
Well, an amphora comes from ambi and pharaoh, meaning carried by both hands, you know. And it's the containers of antiquity. I mean, if you were going to carry liquids in particular, what could you carry them in? They didn't have very many glass jars, so these are clay pots.
Yeah, these pictures here that you're seeing are different sizes of amphoras. So they carried like wine, seeds.
Yes, and actually in the center picture, those are more pottery for household uses. But on the right-hand side, the diver's carrying a big, what we call a transport amphora, which was used to carry, you know, like 20 or 30 liters of wine or olive oil.
Then briefly, maybe we can go kind of your journey into underwater archaeology, because as was introduced, you came to Turkey mid-60s to teach physics, but then
Yes.
you were volunteering in the summers down here with George Bass. And how did you start? How were these shipwrecks being found?
Well, they were found by the Turkish sponge divers, and they're our greatest underwater research device, because in the old days, there were no artificial sponges, so real sponges were incredibly valuable. And there were maybe 30 or 40 sponge boats going out for 3 or 4 months, looking all over the coast of Turkey for sponges in the depths that divers could go. And so they would stumble on ancient shipwrecks and not pay much attention to them, but they could perhaps remember them.
And these are pictures of you talking to the sponge divers, right?
Yes.
Asking them about what
And I
they
would
found.
ask them about what they found. And that was my research, was to talk to the sponge divers rather than to go out and try to find things myself, because it's a big sea and shipwrecks are small.
Yeah. But there was one technology that you did apply back then, briefly also, these sonar machines, right?
Yes.
This is the picture of the machines?
Yes, and me getting very cold.
Yeah, you're trying to heat up here.
Heat myself from a cold dive. But the sponge divers were much better resource.
But can you explain like this technology a little bit, how it worked?
Well, the technology is that a shipwreck from an ancient cargo ship leaves a mound on the seabed, as you can see on the right-hand side. And if there is such a mound, and if you send sound waves along the seabed, they'll bounce on the mound and come back and give a reflection, which is a picture. But rocks will give a picture also. And it just turns out that a better machine was the Turkish sponge diver.
The sponge divers, yeah. And so this is your first shipwreck that you were involved in, is the Yassada, which is 5th century AD, so about 1,500 years old. And this was an amphora wreck that you could maybe tell a little bit about. Yeah.
Well, I would mention one thing also. My father, who was a physicist also like me, but his hobby was photography. And so I very quickly, when I started working with the underwater archaeologist, I grabbed the camera. And so I got into taking pictures underwater. So what I was doing most of the time when I was diving was trying to capture what was happening in a photograph. And I also had the luxury that I could take lights underwater. So that, because if you have a flash, you're shooting right from where you are and you're getting a lot of reflection from the silt in the water. But you can place lots of lights and you get wonderful pictures.
And this is the Yassada wreck, which was an amphora wreck. This was only carrying amphoras. Yeah. And then, you mentioned, because back in the day when you were going diving, this is before you had the ship, you were going on these barges that had the decompression chamber. Can you talk a little bit about this barge here?
Well, I'm not sure what I could say about it, except that you need a platform to dive from. And what's very important is, in case you have a diving accident, you need to put your diver under pressure again. I mean, a diving accident means the diver comes up and he has bubbles in his blood system that get into the brain. He can pass out, he can die. And so you want to put him under pressure right away. And in the old days, they used to throw them in the sea again, but we would have a chamber. You can see that little spot there on the left. And so you could pressurize the diver and squeeze the bubbles down so that after an hour or two, he would breathe them out.
Yeah. And that's my mom there.
Yes.
With my dad.
Yes.
So, and then let's talk a little bit about the Bodrum Castle, because here's again pictures of the amphoras that you were excavating. And why was the Bodrum Castle special, related to all these, the Institute of Archaeology, of Underwater Archaeology?
Well, one of the main questions is, when you have all these artifacts, where do you store them? And the castle was a great place to store all the amphoras. And then people became interested in them, and we made a display of some of the things that we found.
Mhm.
And a bunch of amphors by themselves, well, are somewhat interesting, but what became more interesting were the individual smaller finds, like the gallery pottery and the personal belongings of the divers on the ship.
Yeah. And on that note, let's talk about Serçe Limanı wreck, which was a glass wreck. And from 11th century AD, so about 900 years, this was in the late 70s that you were
Yes.
digging on this one.
And this was an incredibly unique find because this was a ship carrying a cargo, not really mostly of glass articles, but rather of broken glass that was going to be recycled. But there were some whole artifacts on the ship. And we think that the people who went to get the broken glass said, oh, let's take some of these home also and we can sell them along the way. And then in the Bodrum Museum, there were what we called the glass girls who...
Oh yeah, that I will come to, sorry. That's the
Okay,
next
there
picture,
they are,
yeah.
the glass girls who spent years, you can see all the broken glass there on the right, sorting the glass by color, and then little by little reconstructing artifacts from the broken glass. An incredible job that they did.
Yeah. And then after, yeah, these are some of the pieces that they put together.
Well, in fact, you have in the right hand, but on the left hand side, you have two of the pieces that were complete, which was just fortunate. We had the good luck to find a few pieces. That was a perfumed water sprinkler, and that was a decanter, and you can see the lion there.
In the middle one, yeah.
Yeah, and it's covered with underwater, growth, so it hasn't been fully cleaned.
And yeah, these were also some of the finds.
Yes, those were weights for a balance pan. And then in the center picture is the detail of one of the few complete tumblers, a glass tumbler. We call it the lion glass because that is actually a lion.
And these were all kind of under sand, underwater, but you dug them up, right?
Yes,
yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, and this was also part of the Serçe Limanı shipwreck.
Yes, and we realized that one of the most important artifacts of the shipwreck was the ship itself. And of course, the exposed part of the ship was mostly eaten by teredo worms. But a lot of the ship was covered by the cargo, and grain by grain, currents of water and sand would hit the pile of cargo, and the sand would cover the shipwreck and preserve some of it. And so we would take the wood and soak it in fresh water to get out the salt. And then we would soak it in something called polyethylene glycol, a water-soluble wax. And we would heat the wax and leave the water in this wax for weeks so that it would absorb as much of the wax as possible and then dry it out. And then we could actually put the ship back together.
Yeah, and this again is a display that was in the Bodrum Museum
Yes.
of the Serçe Limanı shipwreck.
That's right.
And these were some of the other artifacts that you found on the shipwreck.
That's right, including, you can see there a chess set.
Yeah, on the left photo in the middle, I'm not sure if my cursor is visible, but there's a chess set. And
Yes.
these were weapons you said
Yes.
that you found, yeah. So yes, then the biggest find of the century was the Uluburun wreck that maybe some of the people in the audience know, but this is the oldest wreck found in history, right? It's 3,100 years old.
Yes, that's right.
And you were one of them who found it through the sponge divers, or?
Yes, I wanted to find something really important. And I knew that the Bronze Age, I'm a physicist, but I know a little bit about history. And so when I talked to the sponge divers, I wanted to find out whether they found something really old. So I would always ask them, I would draw them a picture. If you, on the right-hand side, you can see the diver holding an ingot of copper. And so I would draw a picture of an ingot and I'd say, had you ever seen one of those? And one day a diver told me, yes, I had.
I had, and there it was.
And so I asked him where it was, and he told me roughly, and I went and looked for it, and it was there.
Then, so yeah, here's more of these ingots. So this is the overview of the
Yeah.
wreck, and you can see all the ingots.
And
So
I
these,
think that this one picture of the diver on the ingots, that was the most incredible moments of my life, to find not one ingot, but hundreds of ingots stacked just like they were on the ship.
and these ingots, what were they for? They're made of copper. Like how did they use these ingots?
Well, the important point is they were transporting copper as a raw material, but how did they, they would pour the copper into a mold to transport it, but how did they pick up the ingots of copper? Well, they put handles on the ingots, and they looked like an oxide then. That's why we called them oxide ingots, and those were just handles at both sides so they could carry them.
Those ears were like the
Yeah,
handles
the ears
for the
were the
carrying them.
handles.
Yeah. And on this wreck, you also found some other artifacts. I think these are the pictures of the artifacts, and
Yeah.
this is kind of the system of how you surface the artifacts.
With balloons, that's right.
And then these are some of the findings from the Uluburun wreck as well.
Yes.
Some pottery
And
and
these we call them ingots of glass, which was really incredible for glass of the period. And on the right-hand side, those are weights from the upper right, from a balance pan used to weigh precious metals, and also then, yes, pottery.
But these were some of the most incredible finds that I also
Yes.
remember very vividly. You have, yeah, you can explain.
Well, on the upper hand left is a cup, a Mycenaean kylix, they called it, a ceremonial drinking cup. And we got to drink wine out of it, I think. It was a no-no. But then we found a cosmetic box in the shape of a duck and a ram's head drinking corn. But then we found this scarab of a seal made out of gold with the name of Queen Nefertiti on it.
And this on the right hand side on the top, that's a print, like it's a rolled print.
Yes, they rolled that out. That what we actually found was not the print. We found the scarab itself. You see on the far right?
Yeah, yeah.
There
And they
it
would
is.
roll it.
And
to
we
make
made
us-
a roll out of it just to take a picture of what it was. That's how they would sign a document. And then
this
this
medallion-
incredible gold medallion.
And actually, if I'm not, you found it by mistake. It got stuck in the, maybe you can explain that system, because how was it you were actually doing the digging?
Yes, we had an underwater vacuum cleaner, which was a piece of irrigation pipe. And if we let put compressed air at the mouth of the pipe, it would run up the pipe, and that created a vacuum. And so we used that as an underwater vacuum cleaner. And of course, the idea was to remove sand, not to suck artifacts up the vacuum cleaner.
But this one almost got sucked by mistake.
But well, we had a catch bag at the top of the vacuum cleaner. So if anything went up by mistake, we would find it, or we would see it going up and whoop, whoop, whoop, and tell people.
So then, yes, this is life on the Uluburun camp, which I also remember from my childhood. So
Yes.
basically, you spent 10 years, every summer, 3 months in this campsite outside, which was like a 45-minute tuk-tuk away from Kash. And here's Virazan, the boat that you were diving off. And on the upper left-hand corner is my artwork as a child describing life.
Sure.
But yeah, how was it? So basically, every summer you were there 3 months, and you were diving 6 days a week,
Yes.
twice a day, but you had Fridays off.
Yes.
And why was that? You were telling me earlier.
Well, you needed to give your body a rest. In other words, every time you were diving, you were accumulating nitrogen in your bloodstream, and then you would come up, and 10 or 20 feet below the surface, you would be under very little pressure, so you would get rid of most of the nitrogen, but it accumulated, so we would take a day off
Mm-hmm.
and that was always good because
Yes, you could drink.
we could drink. Yes.
But otherwise, yes. And the Virazon was the boat of the Institute for several decades. This is where all the action was happening.
Yes, and that was our home and our dive boat. And in some places we went and we lived in the Virazon and we dived from the Virazon. But at Ulebrun, we had the luxury of building a camp on the rocks and living on the rocks.
Yeah, which was.
So we had a lot of space and we had even individual flats for families.
Yeah. And then this is, I think, the remains of what you found on the Uluburun wreck of the ship,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
And that's a model of the ship in the lower left-hand corner with what it was carrying, which were the ingots of copper and tin, and then anchors and large jars and smaller jars that were carrying wine and resin.
But this is you only found this little piece, right? This is the wood of the.
Well, we found very little of the ship, but we found enough of the ship that we could reconstruct it. You can see there in that picture the pieces, but we had part of the keel and we had part of the frames and the planking that was attached to the frames.
Mm-hmm. And then these were the replicas made of the Sarçelimanı and the Uluburun ship that were in the castle as
that's
well,
right.
right? Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure they're still there because the castle has been closed for a while, but hopefully maybe Orkan can tell us more about that.
Yes.
Oops. Oh, sorry. This got a little mixed, but yeah, this was supposed to be a picture of Selimiye. So this was another campsite.
Yes.
But this was flat land, not on the rocks. And this is where you actually had a deck where you could dive from.
Yes, and also because we're in Flatland, on the day off, we could take a bus and go somewhere nearby.
Yeah.
It was very tight living.
Yeah, as you can see.
Yes.
And yeah, this is also the Selimiye shipwreck, which was also 11th century AD, but also composed of lots of amphoras.
Yes.
Yeah. And this is, again, I guess it's being lifted, but Orkan will be talking more about the Selimiye and the Kızılburun wreck.
Yes, that was an interesting wreck because they were carrying marble drums that were used to make one column for a temple or something like that. And of course, the exciting thing was raising, as you see in the right-hand photograph, raising these columns from the seabed with balloons. And the point being that these balloons were full of air, but as they were rising to the surface, the air was expanding. So you had to make sure the balloons were pretty full and the air escaped from the balloons. Otherwise, you'd have
crash
columns shooting to the surface and dropping down on the divers.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is again
a
kind
picture of the ship freight or the columns on the seabed.
Mm-hmm. And again, I think Orkan will be talking about, but it's much more advanced technology compared to the 1960s when you were asking sponge divers. Now you could go around yourself. Yes, and then there's the final photo of kind of more on a personal note, because this is kind of my memory of my father's years underwater. And on the bottom left-hand corner, so you know they had to do these long decompressions. So you did 2 dives a day, 20 minutes only. You had only 20 minutes underwater to basically do the dig, right? And then you had to do 20 minutes decompression. And here's a picture of them reading books. And my dad read several books underwater.
Yeah, that's not pose. That's really what we were doing. If twice a day you're cold and you're waiting for 20 minutes to come out, if you have something to do, like reading a book, it really helps to pass the time.
And you put them in a bag, or what was it? How did you?
Yeah, we put them in a bag to take them down, but then we took them out of the bag and we had to turn the page very carefully and maybe put it back in the bag to hold it. But the other thing I got into was blowing bubbles, and I got very good in blowing bubbles inside bubbles.
Yes, and that because I would hold the time. I would be your deco timekeeper, and then you would usually throw bubbles. And on the top right corner, that's my sister, who's I think also in the audience. That's her helping my dad get his suit off, and a
Yes.
little family picture
Yes.
to end it with. But yes, thank you. So
No, you're welcome.
that's history from us.
Good.
Thank you for this beautiful presentation. It was very touching also.
Yeah, well, I hope the museum, you know, the Underwater Archaeology Museum in Bodrum really is a remnant of this history. I don't know what's happened with the restoration, how much they've kept, but you know, it's part of that history is there. So, you know, whenever you come to Bodrum, you should visit it. But
You should definitely do that.
we'll continue with Orkan, who will talk more about the recent stage of the Institute, since my dad retired about like 15, 20 years ago. But yes, and thank you, Orkan,
Yes.
who had 38-degree fever last night, but is still here with us. Thank you.
No worries, no worries. It's a great pleasure for me, especially talking with Dambe. I really missed him.
Yes. Good to see you in
Good
person.
to see you. And
Hopefully.
you already explained what I will say. So it's really great to
You can add to it or repeat it. That's all right.
So I guess I will do the share screen.
Sorry, there's a question, I think, from Akın Savaş Toklu. If you accept it, I can take
Yeah,
it.
sure.
Are we still live?
Yeah, we're still live.
Okay.
We can take the question.
Sorabilir miyim ben?
Ha.
Ben duyamıyorum sizi ama siz beni duyuyor musunuz?
Biz duyuyoruz sizi.
Okay. I really thank you, Don. I don't know if you remember me. This is Dr. Akin Toklu from Underwater and Hyperbaric Medicine Department from Istanbul University, Istanbul Medical.
Akın Toklu from
okay,
Underwater
okay.
Hyperbaric
Yeah.
we will remember, but please
Okay.
go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I remember diving together with in Selimiye, and I was watching you. If you haven't shown the picture, I would ask you, how could you manage to form this circular bubbles? Anyway, my question is, do you still dive, or if you stop diving, when did you stop, or which reason?
I haven't had really the opportunity to dive. If there was something exciting to dive for, I think I would do it.
Yeah, I can guess that you wouldn't find something more exciting than you have already met.
No,
so
but
unlucky for you.
even exciting. The thing is, I don't know if they'd let this old guy dive anymore. They wouldn't risk it, but maybe they would.
Okay,
If I was a
but
guest
when
diver,
was your last
not a
dive?
guest dive, I would risk it.
Okay,
Not breath hold.
all right, okay. When was your last dive?
When was your last dive? My dad's memory is fading him, but
Yeah.
maybe 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago.
Let's say it was like 10 or 15 years ago. Yeah, I mean, I haven't had any opportunity to dive since then. I mean, maybe even on a vacation or something like that. And of course, when I go swimming, I always have to drop down for 15 or 20 feet or 10 meters, 15 meters, just for the fun of it, to breath hold and experience being down there.
And what was your deepest dive? 65 meters, 60 meters?
5 meters, yeah, something like that.
But let's pass the floor to Orkan and we'll continue the conversation. And thank you, Mr. Akın.
Okay.
We had another question, but if you want to take it after.
Yes, please, let's do it after.
Okay.
First of all, I would like to thank you to invite me that very nice meeting and to giving me a chance to introduce myself and my foundation, INA, Institute of Nautical Archaeology, that is focusing to ship construction history from the beginning until Ottoman period, especially in Turkey. INA basically found in, BRC, we call BRC Bodrum Research Center, is in Bodrum. Before I forget it, if you will able to come to Bodrum, please visit us and you can see by yourself what we are doing in Bodrum, actually. And I'm not talking about archaeological details of the shipwrecks, and mostly I'm trying to tell you about diving part of what in our excavations, in our surveys. Most of the shipwrecks, this is the Kızılburun, the southern part of the Çeşme Peninsula. We start to excavate this shipwreck in 2005, as far as I remember, until 2011, and there was a first century Roman wreck below. Can you see my cursor? There is a catamaran in here, and there is a shipwreck below that catamaran. The catamaran is basically was our diving platform, which Dambe and Kristin Hoca already showed our old diving platform before, and we were using that Milavanda, her name was Milavanda. We were using her for a long time. And the other ship is our research ship Birazon, which is about 60 years old, almost 60 years old. And unfortunately, she had to be retired a couple of years ago. And this is the campsite of Kızılburun. Actually, the camp life is so basic, so simple, but sometimes it's a little painful, especially because of the insects, and some other animals, wild animals, because as I said, our excavations are always very remote places. This is Milavanda, which we were using as a diving platform. In here, you can see in here pre-dive preparations. The timing for our job, the timing is one of the most important thing for us. So normally between, for example, that on this wreck, it was starting in 37 meters towards the 52 meters below. And we were spending exactly 20 minutes at the bottom, 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the afternoon. And we had to give at least 5-hour break for getting rid of the nitrogen in our blood veins. So we have job separation on that diving platform. Every day we were changing our jobs. For example, timekeeping, which Kristin Hoca already mentioned about that, was taking time. If we are doing 20 minutes time dive, we are taking time for that, and we have an alarm system for underwater, and in 18th minute we are beeping the alarm, because it means that we are saying to diver that you must get ready to get rid of from the wreck site. Otherwise, even in 1 minute extra diving time, giving you extra deco time for your nitrogen in your blood. This shipwreck found in 1996 during one of the INA's ancient shipwreck surveys, and you can see the Dambe in here. As you can see here, that wreck was completely looking like covered some stones with the sea growth. So it was almost impossible to identify what was that. But just after the excavation, everything's getting more clear and clear. As you can see here, this ship used to carry a single column, which separated to 8 column drums and 1 base. You can see here there are 4 stack of drums and another 4 stack of drums here, and the capital is here. And each of them are between the weight of these marble column drums, the weight of them are between 5 tons to 7 tons. So they are quite heavy. And you can see some kind of marble slabs around here. Dambe and Christian Hoca are already talking about airlifting. Airlift, as you can see here, is basically a vacuum cleaner, as Dambe said, for us, which is working with the pressurized air. So it's sucking the sand in it and dumping out from the exhaust. But airlifting is a quite sensitive job, because if you are airlifting very fast, you can easily lose small objects, as Dambe mentioned. And if you are doing very slow hand fanning with the airlift, you already have 20 minutes bottom time, and you cannot finish cleaning all around the wreck site. So you need a practice, you need to improve your practice in time, and you should do your best for best results. For these drums, after we finished all around the drums, finishing excavation all around the drums, we had to lift all these drums. So we were using 3-ton capacity lifting bags, as you can see here, to lift them. And we lifted 8 column drums and 1 capital. We were in here, for example, there are 2 3-ton capacity, means 6 tons lifting capacity balloons completely filled with air, which tied to the capital. And also you can see a chain here, which goes up to 33 meters, just until below the surface. So there are 2 more same lifting bags at the top. So what we are doing in here, we are completely filling with the compressed air all these balloons, and then we are escaping around the column drums, and the other 2 lifting bags at the surface filled from the surface. And then when the filling process be done, the drum or the capital lifted by itself about 2 meters or something like that. And by this way, with the help of these lines, we attach these lines to pulleys close to the column drums. We move them to eastern part of the wreck area, where we called drum garden. And we drop all the drums away from the shipwreck area to see what kind of construction features left underneath of these drums. And then we had to flip all these drums on the other side to investigate what they have, what kind of features they have on the other side, on the other face of these drums. So we are flipping only one single lifting bag is enough to flip them. And we are filling them with the air, then flip it by itself. And as I said before, these pulleys were helping us relocating all these drums and capital. And then we surfaced all these drums, 8 drums, 1 capital, and 1 big stone pieces, loaded to ship in 2 different years, 2009 and 2011, and sent them to Bodrum. And you can see here in the back garden of the Bodrum BRC, Bodrum Research Center, you can see these drums by yourself. Apparently, these drums, after all these investigations and analysis, according to the lead isotope analysis, these drums quarried from Marmara Island, which ancient Prokennesos Island, which is still famous about marbling. And ancient time, it was one of the biggest marbles support of the Roman Empire. So on that 8 column drums, when you put them together, you can create one single column with the capital for supporting the roof of ancient temple. And according to the dimensions and other features of these column drums, apparently that ship was sailing towards to the Klaros, close to Izmir, Salih Bey, for Apollon temple. And apparently they were not able to reach that temple, and apparently they were out of one single column during the building process. So what we are doing for the decompression, all of our dives has a decompression feature, because we are doing a deep dive and repeated dive, and we are giving only 1 day off in a week, again, for due to get rid of the nitrogen in our bloods. So we are doing decompression 15 minutes, mostly 15 minutes in the mornings and 20 minutes in the afternoons. And so, as you can see, we are doing our decompression with the pure O2 oxygen, and we are waiting in that grid. It's actually, as Dambe said, that it's quite boring process, and you have to spend your time, especially if you get cold. It's mostly, especially that Kızılburun wreck was so chilly. I mean, it was so cold. What we were doing was feeding fishes or reading books, or as you can see here in Dambe, sending bubbles up. And this is Pabuçburnu shipwreck from the 5th century BC, very close to the Bodrum. As you can see here, while we are doing our excavations, the excavation area, excavation field, excavation site actually is a kind of construction area. As you can see, there are lots of different airlifts, because if it's possible, everybody requires their own airlifts, because it is difficult to moving the airlifts, because it's a huge item from one side to other side of the shipwreck, and you can easily damage the shipwreck because it's very fragile. So we are rigging up the airlifts as many as possible. And these things, these triangle towers, we are saying that these towers, for creating a reference points for 3-dimensional mapping of the wreck site. And as you can see here, this is, we call this device is telephone booth, which is filled with the air in it. And as INA, Institute of Nautical Archaeology, diving safety is the most important thing for us. I mean, nothing can be important than human life. So without safety, we cannot dive to anywhere. So before start excavation every season, we are building, the first thing that we are doing is rigging up the foam booth. What's the reason to have a foam booth? Foam booth have a around it, as you can see here, it has extra tanks, air tanks around it, and it has a breathable air in it. If any kind of things can happen, the diver can easily access and enter the telephone booth, and you can communicate, or you can check your you can communicate from the up, and you can check your diving stuff, like if there's any problem from your first stage or second stage, you can easily take out your rigging, and you can check everything. And if you have to, you can easily go up in the limits of decompressions. And here, as you can see, we are bringing our telephone booth everywhere, wherever we are doing our excavations. And for example, this place was so difficult to rig up the telephone booth. As you can see, it goes to about 60 meters here, and we just put the telephone booth in the edge of the cliff. As I said, the safety, human life is the most important thing for us. That's why I will explain later, but as a INA policy, first rule, we cannot dive anywhere if there is no hyperbaric chamber. So in our research ships, we definitely have chambers in our research ships. And in here, for example, this picture taken in 2019 and 2 years ago, unfortunately, our partner, there was some problem, and 2 divers banded. One of them was type 1, another one was type 2, and we were able to cure them with the hyperbaric chamber. And in front of our front garden at BRC, you can see our old chambers, and each 3 of them can connect to each other and disconnect also. And you can easily translate the patient wherever you want with the pressurized air. Excavations, not always very calm, very luxury, and very easy. Sometimes you are living, at the end of the day, you are living on the sea, and something can happen, like in here, a rope caught by a propeller, and our research vessel hit to the rocks, and we had to save our research vessel. And we have to be so careful about that. Sometimes it could be so dangerous to work that kind of remote places. We are not only working in Turkey, but we are also working in other countries. Like in here, you can see Sri Lanka Godawaya shipwreck at Sri Lanka. This is the earliest shipwreck, Roman shipwreck in Indian Ocean. It sounds very strange that Romans in south part of the India, but apparently there are some trade communities, trade colonies of Roman Empire in the Sri Lankan island. So apparently one of the ship was sank while they were carrying a Roman artifacts. As I said, hyperbaric chamber is the most important asset for us for safety, and we brought our hyperbaric chamber to also to Godawaya, Sri Lanka. We have some research vessels, like on the left-hand side, you can see the Virazon. It's a legendary ship, 60 years old, and she was built for the Korean War, and then she came to Turkey for the NATO, and then they turned over to INA. And INA was using Virazon for a long, long time. And on the right-hand side, you can see the first and only research submersible in Turkey. We were searching shipwrecks, and we were observing ship excavations via this submersible. And Milavanda, I already talked to you, Milavanda. Milavanda was using to housing for the Caroline, that's submersible, for a long time. But when on the left-hand side, you can see Claude Duty, who was one of the founders of INA, and on the right-hand side, the father of scientific underwater archaeology, and he is the legend, and unfortunately he passed away 2 weeks ago. Was with their attempts, INA was able to get stronger that much. And legacy of Claude Duty was the building research ship for INA in Turkey. And George Bass kindly asked me to design a new research vessel for INA, and I was able to working and design that first and only archaeological research vessel for Turkey. There are lots of different research vessels all around the world which can be used for the archaeology, but this ship is the first and only classed approved archaeological research vessel in the world. Our first project with Virazon 2, our new research vessel, was at Yassıada in the western part of the Bodrum Peninsula, just off the Turgut Reis. And Dambe and Christian Hoca already talked about the Yassıada wrecks, and we revisited the Yassıada again after many years. And our first main purpose was to making three-dimensional model of where all the shipwrecks, because apparently there are more than 16 shipwrecks from 1st century BC until 1992. And you can see a reef here. All the ships are coming here from that direction or from that direction, hit the rocks and sank all around that reef. And as you can see, there are two Rhodian amphora stacks, which was there are different shipwrecks, two different examples from the area. And this is the Mirna M, which was the last victim of this reef in 1992. And we dove there, and we took about 12,000 pictures for making a model, a 3D model of all that area. And as you can see here, we mostly create, it's not completely done yet, but it's mostly, we mostly created a three-dimensional model of the area. Also, these two wrecks are excavated by INA, again, which mentioned by Christian Hoca and Dambe, Yassıada, 5th century Ottoman wreck and 7th century shipwrecks. This picture is very interesting. I really would like to share it with you because if you are interested about this traditional sailing, or if you are interested about the sailing, probably you know that there is a regatta in Bodrum every year, which called Bodrum Cup, and this is the STS Bodrum, which was built by my father and designed by my father, and also the other one is built and designed by myself. So it was so unique moment for us to keep together, come together, fathers and sons ships together, which I mean, the ships are completely from the different worlds, but we met at the same point. In Virazon 2, we designed that ship not only for diving or archaeological works, but also we using that ship for different purposes. Like we have a great open space on the back of the ship, stern of the ship, because having our submersible Caroline, and when we haven't got the Caroline on deck, we are able to use all that empty space for different purposes. Excavation actually is the most fun, entertaining part of the archaeology, and on the other hand, excavation is the only obvious part of the iceberg over the sea. But our main job begins after the excavation. As you can see here, there are tons of small artifact pieces in here, and we are talking, keep them together according to where they are coming from and what kind of color they have, what type of amphora or ceramic can it be, that kind of things, and we are grouping everything. And then, as you can see here, these amphora pieces are from the Pabuçburnu excavation from 5th century. We are trying to put them together as much as possible, then actually our team is very, very successful about that. As you can see here, because of the paper tapes, we are using paper tapes to put them together before glue them. You cannot see the original surface due to the amount of the paper tapes. Actually, our job is not that much clean job. You can see the Dambe already mentioned about the polyethylene glycol for conservation of the hull remains of the ships, wooden hull remains of the ships, and you can see the tanks, heated tanks in here. But as I said, our job is not that much clean always. Our team suffering because of that hot polyethylene glycol, and it's quite dirty job to work on that. Thank you so much for your patience, and hopefully it was enjoyable for you. And if you will have any kind of questions, please let me know. And also, I really would like to extend my thanks to Dambe, because I feel so lucky and so happy to train by Dan Fry, George Bass, or Jamal Puak, and I was so lucky to educated in with the legends. And also, on the other hand, I need to say one last thing, because we have a partner in Turkey, TINA, Turkish Institute of Nautical Archaeology, and as far as I know, the director of TINA, Oğuz Aydemir, you hosted him last year, and they are our partner in Turkey, as I said, and they are the great supporter for improving the Turkish archaeology in Turkish waters. So I really would like to say thank you to them also.
Thank you for this beautiful presentation. Now we can have the questions. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand or write in the chat.
There is one question from the chat, and I will explain it. The question is from Barış Çiftçi. He asks, hello, thank you and your daughter for this great talk. My question is, has Mr. Donald Frey studied the sunken Swedish warship Vasa and its conservation efforts?
The sunken Swedish, could you repeat it? The sunken Swedish?
Warship Vasa and its conservation efforts.
I think I see Orkan is going to talk, because I don't think my dad has excavated it. No.
Okay.
Orkan.
Good.
Vasa is a quite famous shipwreck, and the conservation is one of the most important conservation process in the underwater archaeology world. And they are, I don't know, do you know the history of the Vasa? But they raised the Vasa to the surface in 1972 or something like that. But since for about 5 years or something like that, I'm not 100% sure, because I'm not conservator. Anyways, they were spraying the PEG, polyethylene glycol, to get rid of the water from the waterlogged wood. And after that special treatment, they put that shipwreck into the special air conditioning environmental room, I mean hall, not room, hall in Stockholm. And the only thing that they were dealing with currently, they were dealing with the sulfuric acid problem because of the iron objects. Anything else that I can say?
I don't think he has any else question. He says thank you from the chat.
You're welcome.
Next, Akın Savaş Toplu has a question. I guess we can unmute him.
Me again. I really thank you for these two nice presentation to Don and Orkan, and also Kristen as well. I really appreciate it. Also organizing committee and the guest speakers. Of course, in a diving operation, the safety is first. And as long as I participate in the diving operation of INA, I saw that they are really careful for the safety. So they always keep a recompression chamber there, and they apply the oxygen recompression, which makes the diving safety if it is done in the rules. During my involvement or our colleagues in the involvements in Kızılburun shipwreck or in Selimiye shipwreck, we haven't seen any serious case diving related disease. But I ask you if you had any really serious diving disease during these operations. And my second question, then I will stop. I know that there are some also other diving doctors involved or participated during these underwater operations. And I know that Caroline Fife, when he was very young, was in Uluburun wreck. She was involved. And I know that the name of little submarine is Caroline. Is there
Yes.
any relation with that, or I just wanted to know
No,
where
actually,
the name came from?
the name is coming from the wife of the person who donate that submersible to us.
Yes, bravo, bravo. Better memory than mine.
But in terms of serious risks, actually, we forgot to say in the presentation, you had a bend. You got bent one.
Yeah, I
Is that
got
how you
bent.
say you get bent?
Yeah,
You
I
get
was bent, yes.
The vurgun.
Vurgun,
You had the
yeah.
vurgun.
Yeah.
Do you remember how it
I
happened?
don't remember anything anymore.
But do you
No,
remember?
I do remember, yes. And I had a chamber ride that was a little scary, but
It was because you were, how long were you in the chamber for?
maybe only in the chamber for 4 hours or something like that.
But you were saying it's kind of
It
claustrophobic.
is a very claustrophobic because it was a small chamber, just a tube, rather than one that you can go in and sit down and read magazines.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I
I came out.
You came out fine, but I remember that you weren't aware that you had the vurgun, the bend.
Yeah.
But when you came out on the boat, half of your face was.
Yeah, I was talking like this.
And that's how people understood that you had the bend. So yeah, that was one serious accident.
Yeah.
There were about, maybe I'm wrong, but there were about 22,500 dives in Uluburun, and only 3 cases happened in Uluburun.
Yeah.
Well, we were very careful. You know, good decompressions.
Definitely.
Yeah, but it's a big commitment to do this 3 months, like you said, 6 days a week, twice a day, and you only get 40 minutes underwater. Basically, you only have 40 minutes time to be doing the dig. So it's a lot of preparation, decompression, and only 40 minutes of work.
Sometimes the most exciting thing was the day off.
This is the only time that you can drink something else than water.
You can drink.
Hello, I have a question. So first of all, thank you all for your speeches. They were incredible. And my question is, so in Sabancı University Sabah Society, or SUS, we have many divers at many levels studying or studied in engineering. And as a physicist, what was your motivation when you channeled to nautical archaeology? So can you give us some advices or something like that on how to combine both knowledge and how to choose from many options that is waiting us ahead? Can you explain what was your motivation?
So the question was,
Chris is going to help you.
Yeah, the question was, you came as a physicist, but
Yes.
then you moved into archaeology. And so I think it was Barış, he said that there's many students who are like doing engineering there. What was your motivation to go into archaeology from physics?
Well, it was the diving, I think, really. I'm a Pisces. That's the month of March, and I love the sea. And when I got into diving, I love that too. And I think that at the beginning, I just had a chance to join George Bass, who was diving on an ancient shipwreck, and I thought that was to die for. And then it was a great way to spend the summers.
And actually, you always told me as a kid, if you went to a cocktail party and somebody asked you, what do you do?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And then you say, I'm a physicist, and they say,
Yeah.
And then if you say, I'm an underwater archaeologist, they say, oh.
Yes.
So I think
That's
it was
more
more
exciting,
exciting.
yeah, that too.
Also, I would like to add one thing to that conversation, because I mean, some people, especially archaeologists, were saying that if you are not an archaeologist, you shouldn't do the archaeology. I'm completely against that idea, because, for example, you or Cemal Puak, who is actually graduated in Boğaziçi University at mechanical engineering, and always that kind of different disciplines giving different point of view to the archaeology. So that's why I'm always supporting the different point of view to archaeology. That's why we are so happy to have you.
I think even on land, sometimes they use volunteers for digs where it's not sensitive, shall we say. You know, they're just kind of sweeping dirt away or something. And when they get to something really important, they call the archaeologist.
What is it? So when you decided to go to archaeology, you did that year in Oxford, you were using your physics degree towards something. What was it you were doing? You were developing some technology that would assist with the diving.
Well, I was interested in how to find shipwrecks, and that's what I did in Oxford. I was sort of researching remote sensing, is what I call it.
So that's, yeah. So there is room for other.
Yeah, there's room for other disciplines somewhat. But mostly underwater, you need to be a good diver and a careful diver. And you have to do what you're told and not do what you're told not to do.
I hope we've managed to recruit. I see there's 112 people. I hope we've managed, Orkan, to recruit some new volunteers who would be interested in the world of underwater archaeology. Yeah.
Hopefully, we definitely need some new volunteers in our world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is another question in the chat from Kerem. He says, thank you for this enjoyable presentation. My question is, was there any diving technologies that were developed over the years that helped you during your researches and dives?
Orkan,
maybe you're
Sorry,
up to
the
date.
internet connection is so bad. So can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, of course. He says, was there any diving technologies that were developed over the years that have helped you during your researches and dives?
Sorry,
more
sorry,
recent.
it's coming and going. I cannot understand.
If you
Yeah.
want, you can it's in the chat. You can see
Where was
if
that?
it is going, or I can repeat it.
No.
I mean, you spoke
Yeah,
about
well,
some of the
I
old
heard-
technologies. Yeah.
I mean, the technology for finding shipwrecks or exploring shipwrecks, they have underwater metal detectors, which are devices that have to be very close to metal before they can indicate that there's anything there. So if you have a shipwreck site, and we have many shipwreck sites, and you're trying to just explore to see what you might have there, a metal detector could be good. For longer distance, there's something called a proton magnetometer, which looks again for magnetic metals, and this means iron. And you can drag a magnetometer over long distances and maybe make a magnetic map of areas when you're looking for things like battleships, things like that. But that's not really used that much. That's it, I think.
Orkan, do you want to add
Orkan, yeah,
anything?
maybe, yeah.
More recent technologies.
You already mentioned the side scan sonar. So this is, I think this is my personal idea. This is the most important development for the underwater archaeology, which made by you actually, for searching shipwrecks. And that technology developed in years, and we are not using the excavation, that kind of things, but for searching the shipwrecks, we are using that kind of technology, side scan sonars, sub-bottom profiler, and multi-beam sonars, that kind of things, based on side scan sonar, which Dambe already created.
I missed the end of that.
No, if there's more
Okay,
questions, we're
okay.
going to see. Yeah.
Hello, I have a question. Firstly, thank you for your speeches and presentations. I would like to ask, from time to time, we hear that there are some unauthorized entries to the archaeological sites and stealing of these artifacts. Was this your concern, or did you experience this kind of situation?
Sorry, I'm explaining to my dad that there was some unauthorized, if there has been any unauthorized digs to the sites, like, was this a concern? Well, we can talk about the past time and the new time, I guess.
Yeah.
Like back in the day, actually there wasn't issues of unauthorized entry, but probably the Turkish government were accusing the American Institute of stealing artifacts. Was there anything like that?
Well, it was more, I mean, there were private boats where they found a shipwreck or knew of a shipwreck, and they would go down and sort of raid it. But, you know, they would just dig holes on the surface. They didn't have the ability to go 1 or 2 meters into the sand to find where the real goodies were.
Okay.
So it was not anything really bad. But I'm trying to think, there was some famous excavation or something way back where they actually did try to raise artifacts from a shipwreck, but I can't remember.
On the other hand, in Turkish waters, for example, our purposes, what we are doing while we are searching shipwrecks, and if we found a shipwreck, we are always giving the coordinates of the shipwrecks and area informations to government. So what they are doing, they are maybe on nautical charts you saw that there is a word there, prohibit to dive or something like that, with the red lines on the maps. But the problem is, this is the only thing at that time, this is the only thing that can we do. Unfortunately, as an archaeologist, I mean, that kind of people who dive into shipwrecks and destroy that shipwrecks are our biggest enemies, because even one amphora piece can be change the date of the shipwreck, or can change the capacity measurement of the shipwreck, and that kind of things. So, I mean, it is so, especially with the development of the scuba diving, unfortunately, they are keep continue, and they're increasing the smuggling the ancient shipwrecks more and more, unfortunately. And it's, for us, it's getting more difficult for us to get better understanding, better knowledge from the shipwrecks.
I'm wondering, in Turkey now, can you dive pretty much anywhere you want to, or can you only dive with a dive guide?
No, you can dive by yourself, but as far as I know, I'm not a diving instructor, but as far as I know, you cannot dive that prohibited areas.
Yeah, the restricted areas where you cannot dive, but there are areas where you can dive, where there might be something, but it hasn't been known and it's not restricted.
Yeah. For example, of the place, they're collecting for about 2 or 3 months. They were collecting, some fishermen were collecting. I don't know the English name of that, deniz hıyarı, deniz patlıcanı, or something like that.
Well, well.
There is a comment, but not a question. Doğa Kayrak Kahraman says that I didn't want to interrupt since this is just a comment, but thank you sincerely for your speech. My heart melted, and actually I cried a little while you speak. I can see that you care both for each other and for underwater world very much. Thank you all for touching our lives and hearts and making a difference.
Oh,
Lovely.
that's very nice. Thank you.
Erman Turan asks that how and where can we apply to join your team?
Our BRC is founded in Bodrum. So if unfortunately, for a long time, we haven't excavated or doing any kind of survey for a long time, but you can easily follow that kind of things, new projects from the social media. So they're posting if there will be any kind of new projects in the future, for example, next year. But especially because of that pandemic, everything's completely canceled for us. We haven't been in the water for about 2 years or something like that. So if you will come to Bodrum, or if you will able to contact with us, if anybody who wants to, I can give my contact information. You can contact with me. I can try to direct you what we are doing, what you can do, what kind of options that we can offer.
Most people I can teach to dive in a few weeks, but I can't teach them to be archaeologists. And so what we need are archaeologists who are ready to learn to dive and join us, rather than the opposite.
That's true.
Well, a little bit of both will help.
Yeah, a little bit of both.
And there's a question in Turkish from Akın Savaş Toklu, and I'll translate to you. He asks, what do you think about the journalist Peter Throckmorton and his contribution to the underwater archaeology in our country?
So yeah, the question was, what do you think about Peter Throckmorton and his contribution to archaeology? Because he was before George.
Yeah,
maybe you can tell that story.
Well, Peter was quite a character, and but I mean, I'm trying to.
Just who is Peter Throckmorton, for those who don't know? He was a journalist.
He was a freelance journalist, and he lived in Greece. And I wish I could remember my stories better, but he learned about shipwrecks or artifacts in the sea, and he went diving, and he wrote a book on his adventures diving, and that was one of the inspirations for me. I read his book and was quite excited by it. But then it sort of stopped there with Peter, I think.
Well, he told George about this. That's how
Yes,
George learned.
that's right.
George Bass learned about the shipwreck through.
This is my memory here. Go ahead.
No, I'm telling the stories that you're telling me.
Yeah, that's right. In 1960, he's making a contact with the University of Pennsylvania, and George Bass was working at the Gordion excavation at these times when he was a PhD student, and his professor Rodney Young said that maybe you can go to Gelidonia and you can check all these ingots, which means, in the parentheses, cookies with the ears.
Cookies with the ears.
Yes, I remember that.
Cookies with the ears, yeah.
But this way, actually,
Kulakli bisküvileri, yes.
directly, but Throckmorton can, how can I say, maybe open the door for George Bey to come to Turkey and start to working in Turkey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
George Bass was the first person who really took archaeology underwater.
Yes, he is.
I mean, who didn't just go and take a few measurements or something. No, I mean, everything had to be done perfectly.
That's why he is that much important, because he is the first and only, not only, but first person who brings the scientific standards of archaeology from land to the underwater. That's why he is that much important. That's why he's legendary and father and founder of the underwater archaeology. Unfortunately, somebody saying that, no, there were some people before George Bass, but no, George Bass is the first person who brought the scientific methods to the underwater archaeology.
But you know, the funny thing is, how do you translate Bass into Turkish?
Levrek.
Levrek. George Levrek.
I think there was one more question, maybe not. I saw, yeah.
Is that for me? Sorry for, I don't know. If we have time, I will just make a contribution. Okay. I will just say that regarding the Peter Throckmorton, one day I made a visit to Slovakia, and there was a professor there who is a diving physician and specialized on diving accidents. So I made a visit to him, and we were talking about how the diving in Turkey, and I talked about the sponge diving in Turkey in the old days. And he suddenly said that I know Tosun Sezen. He just named Tosun Sezen. And I asked him, how did you know Tosun Sezen? And he just stand up and he just go to his library and the shelf, and he took out a book, and that was the book written by Peter Throckmorton, which was in Czech. And he opened the book, and he found the picture of Tosun Sezen, and he showed me, this is Tosun Sezen. And that was really interesting for me. So I think Peter Throckmorton made a great contribution for our country to make familiar on to contribute to underwater archaeology. And I think, yeah, that was the start of the archaeology in Turkey. Sorry for taking your time, but thanks
Can I
again
comment?
for great presentations.
I met Tosun at a cocktail party, at a New Year's Eve party, as I remember right. And I was teaching physics in Istanbul at Boğaziçi, and it was,
Oh,
I
okay.
talked to Tosun, and I'm a Pisces, I'm a water rat. I had already learned how to dive a little bit in Hawaii, and I was so excited by that. And he said, well, you should contact George Bass. You know, he might be interested in using you as a volunteer. So Tosun changed my life.
Yeah, I wish I couldn't think it up. I wish we could invite him as well. I wish he could listen to us, and it's regretted. I think they are recording. Probably I will share the records,
Yeah.
video records to Tosun.
Actually, that was the example, because there was the earlier question by someone about, you know, why you moved from physics to archaeology.
Yeah.
So maybe, you know, this will be kind of like the Christmas party that or the New Year's party that my dad was kind of changed his life. He met Tosun. Tosun told him, oh, there's this underwater archaeologist in Bodrum.
Right.
So now the audience here is also, we're all at the Zoom party, and you've learned, oh, there's these underwater
And I'm
archaeologists.
remembering now, yes.
So maybe this will be a life-changing event for for many.
It's nice you could be here to join me.
Yes, it's nice I could join you here.
We are recently working on a diving medicine book, which is a textbook, like a textbook, and it's related with diving medicine. The name is Fundamental of Diving Medicine, and we just decided together with my friend Frank Novomesk, I think he's among the audience, and we have put the picture of Tosun Sezen in the cover of the book. When he was in the Navy, when he is doing his military service, he was a diver in the Navy. So we have put his picture on the cover. Thank you for taking your time, and sorry for that.
Thank you for your comments. And there is a question in the chat from Deniz Yüksel. He says that we hear a lot of stories about amphoras being taken illegally by some divers in Turkey. Of course, these are stories we hear and not certified, but do you think Turkey can handle the process well, especially recently?
Who's the question for, though?
I don't know, maybe Orkan, do you know about
Orkan,
this?
Yes.
Unfortunately, Turkey is not very handy to handle that kind of problems. We have very limited Coast Guard units around the Turkish coasts, which we have a couple thousand kilometers long, and we have only few Coast Guard, as I said, units, ships in main places, and they are not able to, I'm definitely not blaming them, but they are not able to following every kind of diving activities around that kind of shipwrecks. Unfortunately, we are hearing that kind of stories too. For example, I'm not giving names, but some of the very rich people can dive with closed circuit systems to dive very deep parts and completely destroy ancient shipwrecks and bringing to amphoras or other artifacts to other places. And I wish we can stop them, but it is so difficult to stop them.
It's really difficult to I would say to destroy a shipwreck, that is to say, to really fully excavate it, when you think, of course, we're trying to excavate it archaeologically, but to get down there with airlifts, which are underwater vacuum cleaners, and pull out tons of sand to get down to the goodies is not as easy as just wandering on a site on land where you pick up broken pottery. But it's still, it's fairly well controlled in Turkey, I like to feel. I can't imagine that anything severe has been done to a shipwreck here. I'm not sure. What would you say, Orkan?
I mean, as an archaeologist, of course, I really would like to keep them intact. So this is not always enough for me to protect the shipwrecks that much. I mean, even some archaeologists, unfortunately, I'm not giving names. They're while they're taking pictures, they're moving the amphoras from the part of the ship, and they are destroying the ship's integrity. Which is the most important thing for us. I mean, so we need to develop that kind of mentality in Turkey to protect the shipwrecks.
And it takes a lot of work. Again, like the Uluburun wreck, it took 10 years, right? It was 10 years that you were diving on that site. Yeah.
It was so important and so incredible. Normally, we would excavate a shipwreck with amphoras in maybe 3 summers, 4 summers or something, but that's still a long time and a lot of money. And very often not a lot of knowledge from just an amphora carrier.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions you want to ask from audience? If not, so I want to thank you for your speeches, and we are very humbled to have you here as our speakers. And I want to ask you that if we can take a picture, screenshot all together.
Yes. Oh, yes.
So then if my friend is ready to take screenshots, we can just smile.
Yes, we'll smile.
Who's that old man?
No, you're young. Thank you so much to all of you. This has been really a wonderful opportunity for us to also, as I said, go down memory lane, see Orkan again, and kind of remember all those wonderful years and the work. And yes, I hope it's been interesting for everyone who's been listening.
Yeah, thank you so much. And hopefully you enjoyed our chats.
I can talk behalf of the club, the diving club, Sabancı University Diving Club. We are very enjoyed this. We enjoyed this conversation and the discussion and the presentation very much, and we are very thankful for that.
Thank you.
So
then
now I think we are going to have 10 minutes of a coffee break. We can meet at 55. Yeah, we can meet 5:55.
Enjoy. Bye-bye.
Enjoy. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Teşekkür ederiz.
Hocam çok teşekkür ederim.
Biz teşekkür ederiz. Güzel oldu valla.
Hocam şeyi sormak istiyorum. Slide'da galiba bu bir slide'da sizin galiba çizdiğiniz resim vardı. Suyun içinde diver'ların olduğu.
Evet,
o kadar böyle güzeldi ki. Yani
bir dakika dur.
Getirecek mi?
Where is it? Where's the picture?
What are you looking for?
I'm looking for the picture. Neyse, şeyde duruyordu, banyoda duruyordu ama evet, kaç ilkokul 3'te mi? When was it I made that drawing of Uluburun?
Oh, yeah. You're looking for the Uluburun
Yeah,
picture?
it's somewhere here. Oh, I can't find it. Neyse, evet. Benim yaptığım bir fotoğraftı. O şeyde de en Onda da benim şey yapardım onlara. Dekoya indiklerinde yani böyle işte saatler vardı, böyle 20 dakika tutardık onları. Ben işte onları aşağı inin, sonra böyle bir alarm sistemi vardı, onları çalıştırdık falan, öyle değişik günlerdi yani 40 sene, 30 sene önce.
İnanılmaz gerçekten, hani hayatınız bu şekilde geçmiş. Yani
Evet.
ben de hani sizin hocam olmanız hani farklı bir şey. Hani hatırlıyorum, size de ilk Kaş kampından döndüm hocam dediğimde bunu öğrenmiştim. Benim için de çok şok olmuş. O yüzden böyle gerçekten görünce çok
Evet, evet.
şey geldi,
Allah
dokunaklı.
geldi. Kalede, bir de kale tabii hayatımın içindeydi. Yani küçük bir çocuk olarak düşünsene, böyle kale, baban kalede çalışıyor, böyle gizli odalar var arkalarda. O Can Batık'ın fotoğrafı mesela, orada kocaman bir oda vardı. O kadınlar böyle 10 sene boyunca orada böyle ilmek ilmek o camları böyle bir araya getirdiler. Sonra böyle o kalede enstitünün fundraiser, böyle zengin fundraiser'leri gelirdi. Onlara özel partiler yapılırdı. İşte böyle kostümler giyilirdi. Kapı, you remember they would close the doors and then you would knock the door and they would be like, who's coming? You know, they would wear all the
Right, yes. Oh, that was good.
öyle değişikti yani. O yüzden benim için de bugün çok güzel oldu. Bayağı
Yeah, those were
çocukluğuma.
good days.
Those were good days.
Size bambaşka bir dünyanın kapıları açıldı. En azından kendim için böyle oldu. O yüzden çok
Ya,
teşekkür ederim.
Evet, evet. Bu arada değil mi, George Best'in bir kitabı var. Beneath the, what's his name of his book? Beneath the Seven Seas or something.
Beneath Seven
Beneath
Seas, I
Seven
think
Seas.
that was what it was, yeah.
Ha, yani oradan da o tarihe biraz bakabilirsiniz. Orkan'ın da söylediği gibi maalesef yeni kaybettik George Best'i, ama gerçi o da 89'du.
Evet.
Evet, ama onu da anmış olduk bugün böylelikle.
Evet, aynen öyle. O bakımdan bir mutlu oldum açıkçası. Yani çok üzülmüştüm onu kaybedince. Öyleymiş.
Evet. Babamın da biraz kısa dönem hafıza sorunu vardı ama uzun dönem zehir gibi çalıştı bugün vallahi. Her
It's
şey.
amazing how she speaks Turkish. You
Yeah.
know, I don't understand that.
Evet, that's the story.
I've been in Turkey longer than she has.
Yeah, I know. Well, I was raised here, so. Neyse, tutmayalım biz sizi. Konferansın devamı güzel geçsin umarım. Sorularınız olursa benim de, yani babama sorularınız olursa babamın maili yazabilirim
Tamam.
isterseniz.
Tabii hocam, yani kesinlikle şu an bile bana yazan insanlar var, size ve işte babanıza, Donald Faye'e ulaşmak için yazan.
Tabii babamla Aegean, bakın güzel bir e-mail adresi var. gmail.com. That's your email, right?
Aegean underwear.
No, Aegean
Don.
Don. Evet, babama dalga geçerlerdi. Don, ben özel atmışım, pardon herkese. Don Bey diye. Çünkü babamın adı Don Bey diye geçerdi Bodrum'da, kalede. Herkes Mr. Külot derdi sonra.
Evet.
Don Bey. Bu Aegean'dan. What was the name of your website? Amphras.com.
Yeah, amphras.com.
Babamın eskiden böyle bir web sitesi vardı. Çalışıyor mu hala bilmiyorum. Amphras.com. Benim mail adresimi de yazayım. Orkan, sen de yaz istersen enstitü bilgilerini falan. Yani o eski fotoğraflara bakınca gerçekten böyle babamların dönemi, Orkan alınma. Ama yani babamların dönemi gerçekten böyle
Keşke yetişebilseydim.
O kamp hayatı, hani ben de böyle köşesinden yetiştim. Böyle Kaş'ta Rafet Hoca vardı. 45 dakika böyle pıt pıt pıt pıt pıt pıt pıt pıt tekne vardı böyle. Her gün getirirdi, erzak getirirdi oraya. Başka bir yöntem, yani o kayanın üzerinde yaşıyorlardı 3 ay boyunca. Böyle bir acil bir şey olduğunda işte tabii bu vardı, bir doktor vardı on site. Ama hani yani 6 gün boyunca sürekli oradalar. Tabii sosyolojik boyutuyla da biraz ilginçti yani. Her şey böyle süt liman ilerlemiyordu ama yine de çok, it was an exotic life that you had on the...
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, I think it was it was a different life.
It was, and all just because I met someone at a cocktail party.
Yeah, Tosun that you met at the cocktail party. Neyse, siz
So you
şimdi
should
devam
go to
edin.
cocktail parties.
Yeah, go to cocktail parties.
Meet people.
Var mı, kazandık mı kimseleri bugün sualtı arkeolojisine?
Bence kesinlikle kazandık. Yani şu an biz kendi aramızda da konuşuyoruz. Bayağı heyecanlandık. Böyle Nasıl yani? Hemen böyle biz de bir araştıralım edelim diye. O kitabı
Evet.
da not aldım şimdi. Hep beraber galiba böyle bir okuyacağız, araştıracağız.
Tamam. Beneath the Seven Seas var. Başka Orkan aklıma gelen? Yani o George'un kitabıydı.
Zaten şimdi az önce Not to Ark'ın e-mail diyorum, web sitesini gönderdim. Orada bütün enstitünün yaptığı, George Bey de dahil olmak üzere, yayınlar var. Oradan da bakabilirsiniz.
They could contact Ina College
Yeah.
Station.
Ha bir de
Such
evet.
as it-
And oddly enough, I'll go back to English. The Institute of Nautical Archaeology is based in College Station, Texas, which is as far from the sea as possible.
Yeah.
Why is it there?
But it's at Texas A&M. That's
Texas
what's
A&M,
important.
yeah.
Texas A&M.
Well, they had the money that they gave George, right? So that's why the institute
Yeah.
was there. Yeah. Okay, the rest goes into gossip, so I will end it here.
Yes.
Mom, say hi. Bir de
Hi.
annem de merhaba
Hi,
desin.
everybody. Hello.
Hello.
Okay, so off we go. Enjoy the rest of your conference.
Yes,
Bye.
enjoy.
Bye bye. Bye.
Bye.
That's a super name.
Eğer Bodrum'a gelirseniz bekliyoruz herkese. Yani enstitünün yeri az önce göndermiş olduğum şeyde yazıyor, adresi. Ne zaman isterseniz buyurun, bekleriz.
Çok teşekkür ederiz. Çok sağ olun.
Bye
Görüşürüz.
bye. Bye
Başarılar. Hoşçakalın. Kolay gelsin.
Sağ olun. If you all came back, we can begin. Welcome back. Now we will continue with our second session. Our third speaker today is dear Cristina Zenato. Since 1994, Cristina is an active shark behaviorist, underwater cave explorer, a champion for ocean conservation, photographer, speaker, and writer. Her work can be summarized in 3 words: exploration, education, conservation. She is the founder of the nonprofit People of the Water, organized to widen the distribution of training, education, research related to ocean and environmental issues. I spoke too much. Now I'll let our speaker give our speech titled The Interconnectivity of Water. And before we begin, I want to inform you that we will have your questions at the end of the presentation. And the stage is yours, Cristina.
Hello, and thank you so much for having me. As I was introduced by Is, my name is Cristina Zenato. I'm originally from Italy, and I've been living 27 years in the Bahamas. I'm going to speak about the interconnectivity of water, which is something very dear to me, something that I've discovered also through the years. I didn't start what I started doing now, what I'm doing now 27 years ago, and realized really that. So it was kind of like through the years, one of the opportunities. So I'm about to share. I don't see more. I was asked to profound. No, I don't have more. So I'm just going to share my slides.
It's just top of the screen, Cristina.
More. There it is. And then
Disable
annotation.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. Oof, I know how to use technology. All right, interconnectivity of water. So briefly a little bit about myself. I'm based in Freeport, Grand Bahama Island. It's the archipelago of the Bahamas, right off the east coast of Florida in the United States. We are an independent country, so we're not a United States of America. We're our own country. And I've been here for 27 years. I arrived here in 1994, and I started working as a scuba diving instructor. Basically taking people out scuba diving, teaching them how to dive. And here I met my mentor, Ben Rose, who was doing a shark work. And I started working with him and working with sharks on the water, primarily Caribbean reef sharks. And I have never left. Currently, 27 years later, I'm a course director. So I'm an instructor of instructors. I'm a cave instructor with all the technical paraphernalias that go with it, a rebreather instructor, gas instructor, and I'm a shark behaviorist and work, obviously associate all of this with a research as well, and continuing as working in the tourism industry, taking people, teaching people, and going underwater. The interconnectivity of water is something that we learn in elementary school. This is one of the drawings that I remember as a 6, 7 years old, and we are told that the water evaporates from the oceans, goes into the atmospheres, come down in forms of precipitations, either snow or water, and then it goes either into rivers, lakes, underground, and then recycles back through all sorts of different other media, so from surface runoff to underground runoff back into the ocean. And it's something that sits there with us. But I think as adults, but also in general, we really don't put weight on what this water cycle really means. And it means a lot no matter where we are. We can be in the middle of the New York City, and still we will be connected with the ocean. We will be connected with the underground, and we will be connected with the water that we deal with. So this is the view of my office, and these are what I call my sharks. It's a group of Caribbean reef sharks that I work with on a regular basis, and that is the visibility we average in the Bahamas. So when I enter the water, this group of sharks literally swims towards me. I've been down there for about 27 years. And I work with them in different capacity. One is a shark tourism. So I bring people to see the sharks, to see me interact with the sharks, but also learn how to interact with the sharks from me. It's kind of like a one-on-one experience. But as confusing as this picture may look, after spending all this time with these animals, I actually can recognize each and every one of them on a glance. So as they swim towards me, they look to me as different as each and every one of you as on this video call. And I started giving them names. Now, the names are not what I would say the most flattering kind of names. If you look, I have somebody called Stumpy, which means they have a stump, Scrunchy, Crook, Half-Baked, Hooked. And the reason why I picked these names is if I gave them regular names, these are primarily females. So imagine I have a shark who I name Stephanie, Christina, Josephine, Louise, right? And then I say, well, to recognize Louise, you need to look at her dorsal fin. She has this physical characteristic. And to recognize Christina, you need to look under her left eye. She actually has this physical characteristic. So I pick things that may make them look different. So let's call them blemishes. Could be a scar, could be a little bit of a coloration, could be something missing out of the traditional shape. And then I say, well, to recognize Josephine is this. By the time I give you 20 to 25 names with 20 to 25 characteristics, then you have to make this work. It's like, well, was Christina with a scar underneath her eye? Was it Josephine missing a piece of her fin? And so it becomes very difficult to remember all of this. So I cut the middle process, and so I call the shark missing a piece of her tail Stumpy. She has a stump on her tail. Her name is Stumpy. And I call the guys, one of the few guys that has a little scrunched up head in the middle of his head caused by a fisherman gaff, Scrunchy. So scrunched up head is Scrunchy. And Crook has both fins a little bit crooked. So her name is Crook. By the way, my friends told me I cannot name their children ever. So, but what this does is allows people to enter the water and see the shark that is missing the top of her caudal fin and immediately assume, well, that has to be Stumpy, and makes a connection with the animal. So now all of a sudden they don't just look like a nameless bunch of gray shark-shaped sharks, but they actually start acquiring a name, and with the name comes a connection, and with a connection comes a feeling towards these animals, which is one of the things I've been doing, is educating people on the true nature of sharks. And that includes also protection, how to interact. The one size does not fit all. What I do with a species of sharks, I shouldn't be doing with another species of sharks, but also brings in connection. These are not mindless killing machines. These are animals with feelings, with fears, with hurts. And so I try to bring people into connecting with the animals as creatures rather than something that I can identify. So part of the research that I do is take videos of each and every one of them from each side. So here's Grandma. She swims in first from her right-hand side, and then she comes in from her left-hand side. Grandma is named after the lighter coloration of the shark while we see her underwater. So it's everything underwater. So it's a lighter gray. So it reminds me of the hair of a grandma, and also from her demeanor. She's a very nice, tranquil shark. And then what I do, I also take pictures. So this is still Grandma. And what I do is I take detailed pictures, in this case of her eye, which is a little bit kind of like blemished, is not perfectly cut, and also of the little blemish that you see on the bottom of her of her mouth, that is a physical characteristic that stays. Obviously, one of the hardest part with sharks is finding something that stays, because a shark's skin heals very fast. So I have to find something that it will not run away. So even a scratch on the top of the head 2 months later might not be there. So to name them, I usually wait about 6 months. So I spend 6 months with them in the water. I keep seeing them, and I notice that that blemish doesn't go away. So then the shark gets a name. This one, for example, her name is Peggy. Peg in English is basically when you don't have your hand, when it's been cut off, like a pirate, you have a peg. And so her left pectoral fin is missing a part. So instead of calling her Peg, I called her Peggy, just to give her like a cuter name. And then, for example, this is a black spot. Black spot, instead of having the traditional cut eye of a Caribbean reef sharks, has a black eye. Most likely caused by an injury. We don't know which one. And so black spot, we're in the Caribbean, and black spot is mentioned in some of the pirates' stories. So I thought it would be a great name to give to a shark, like he's carrying a pirate's black spot on his eye. So these are some of the names I give to the sharks that they're easily identifiable. So this is the only sharks that swim around with a dark eye on the right-hand side, and it's a male. So when I say his name is Black Spot, it should be easy for people to recognize. The other thing I do is I support people that want to come and research them. This is a picture of a now dear friend of mine, Elena, doing DNA research. So I put sharks to sleep in my lab, and we just do a quick insertion with the needle and collect some DNA to study whom they're related with, are they connected with each other, as well as we keep track of their size and growth rate. And one of the reasons why is Caribbean reef sharks reproduce based on size, not based on age. Some species of sharks reproduce based on age, but some species of sharks reproduce based on size. So once they reach a certain size, they will start reproducing. So with a super easy, low technology and low cost, which is one of my favorite things, is finding tools that everyone can use. So the more we can use, the more data we can collect. These are 2 laser beams with a little GoPro built in the middle, created by Dr. Miki Mekom-Kabza. And what you do is you basically swim around trying to get the shark in a complete straight line into the video while lining up the 2 laser beams on the side of the shark. As you can see right now, I'm still not achieving, there it is, that's my goal right there. I have the whole shark, then the grouper comes in, I have the whole shark with the 2 laser beams, and then I screenshot this, and through a chart, like a converter, we can actually measure the full length, the fork length, the precaudal length of each shark, and then monitor how much it changes every 6 months to a year. Obviously, the older ladies, the ones that have been with me 13, 14 years, have very little to none change in size. This is done to measure more of the bigger sharks. It's actually really non-intrusive because you have to stay a certain distance. They just have to swim around you, so you don't have to fish them, or you don't have to take them back to the boat. You can do quite a lot while you're on the water. So some of the work that I do with them is all of that. But how does this goes into the interconnectivity or whatever? I have a little, oops, excuse me. Personal love for sharks. I love sharks since I was an 8 years old girl. I wanted to grow up to be an underwater scuba ranger who had sharks for friends. I think I kind of like demonstrate, reach my goal. And I realized the sharks are vulnerable to our presence. The vulnerability I notice is luckily a very mild one. So it's usually damage is left behind by hooks from fishermen or accidental boat accident. So it's actually, compared to other places in the world, not as drastic. But even these little injuries, like a little hook on the side of the mouth, if you notice in this picture, this skin has been rubbed off by the wire that keeps rubbing against the pectoral fin of the animal. And so it gives a skin infection. And so I noticed as I was working with them that they had issues when they had hooks stuck either in their mouth, in their pectoral fins, even worse in their gills. And so what I started to do is literally remove them. Now I wear a protective suit. It's a stainless steel suit that allows me to go through and extract hooks wherever they are, including down deep in their mouths. And what happened when I started doing that is the sharks not only allow me to do this, this is the terminal phase of 40 minutes of trying to remove that hook. And this shark keeps coming back, allows me, it's like, yes, it hurts, I'm going to swim away, and then they circle back and allow me to do that. But then more sharks with hooks that I don't know, that I don't recognize, come in. And furthermore, they stay and they allow me to try to remove hooks. So there's a sort of communication between them. But even more so, what happened is, and this was very much a breakthrough for me, is people started to realizing the sharks are animals that have feelings. And regardless of the people sending me messages saying, oh, you should let the hook rust in their mouth, which to me require for somebody to actually receive one, a lesson in biology, and two, in empathy. People start connecting with me and say, well, I want to save sharks. I want to remove hooks. And I start saying, well, you don't need to remove hooks literally from sharks in order to save them. And I provide other things that we can do, from confronting the legislation in the country we're in, educating people around about the plight of sharks that goes beyond just the hooks that I remove, trying to change the way we interact with our environment. So be mindful not only of the sharks themselves, but how we interact with the food of the sharks, how we interact with the place where the sharks go and reproduce, so that we can actually give a full protection. So after many years and quite a lot of pushing and a petition, we were able to get the Bahamas on the 5th of July of 2011 declared we're 243,000 square miles of archipelago. So we're basically an island country, an island nation. We're a shark sanctuary. So all this work of working with the sharks and demonstrating and doing the tourism, we were able to demonstrate shark sanctuary. So you would think, cool, it's done. Sharks are protected, sharks are saved. We don't have to worry about it. Let's just go diving with them. And that is where the interconnectivity of water comes in. So what I do, this is a part of the job I do. I educate local people as well as people coming from all over the world. I provide these one-on-one courses where people can experience and already transfer this in their own place, in their own country. I do quite a lot of local outreach. Obviously right now, classroom presentations, as you may know, are a little bit limited. But otherwise I go through local schools to train local people to swim, all the way to instructors to do beach cleanup, and so educate on the entire environment. And as we're doing now, since COVID, I've done over 200 presentations online similar to this one, just as outreach programs. And then in the past, I also used to go to live events, right? And the breakthrough comes this day. This picture. This is a baby shark. It's maybe 30 centimeters long. And I was standing in ankle deep water. This is like really, really shallow water. And I was preparing my cave diving gear. And again, we have that image in our head, right? It evaporates, it goes through the grounds. The caves are here. There's water. Obviously, I am in the mangroves, standing in the middle of the water. But then I see this baby shark, and it really dawned on me. I'm about to enter the cave, and at the mouth of the cave, there's a baby shark swimming. So that means mom came here, delivered the babies, and left them here. This is their safe ground. The mangroves in the Bahamas are what we call nursery grounds. They have a place for baby fish, like I said, baby sharks, corals, all sorts of invertebrates. But furthermore, the mangroves, the 3 levels of mangroves are water filters. They also land stabilizer. They they keep the coastline from destruction from hurricanes. And in this world is where the 2 of my worlds connected. So I'm a cave explorer, I'm a shark person. And here, while I was standing in this ankle deep water, I saw this baby shark. We have 2 types of caves. We have the land caves. If some of you have been to Mexico, usually Mexico's most famous, they call them cenotes, which means a freshwater well. And this is what we have, is basically hole in the ground. We're a country of limestone, similar to what you will find in Croatia and on the east side of northern Italy, karst terrain. So this sedimentation, you find this in Greece as well. And water sips through the terrain and deposits itself over the salt water that comes in. So this is one of the type of caves that we have. But we also have what are called ocean blue holes. So these are caves that were formed when the ocean levels were way lower during the ice ages, and they formed through dissolution. So the same as the land caves, water came through, hit the terrain, was mildly acidic, carved its way through and created these tunnels. When the ocean level rose, we're at the end of the meltdown right now. What happened is this caves are flooded, and due to geological and morphological characteristic of the Bahamas, that these blue holes actually have an interesting phenomenon. So they blow water, so they're like spring water out, and then they siphon water in on a cycle. It's 4 cycles total, so 2 springs and 2 siphons, and alternate spring, siphon every 6 hours, and there's a little delay, right? So that's what they do. Where does this water come from? It is a geological transfer between one side of the island or inside of the island with the open ocean, and is due to the shallow waters of the Little Bahama Bank and the Great Bahama Bank. So it's kind of like we could have a lecture just on all of that, but basically these holes transfer water from one way to the other. In the land holes, we have a giant lens of fresh drinking water. And this diver is now floating in air, and this visibility has not been manufactured by the picture. This is the visibility that we have in a freshwater lens inside our caves. So in a country without rivers, without lakes, without mountains, we actually have fresh drinking water coming out of the tap. Well, we had Dorian kind of like messed that one up a little bit. So this freshwater lens, this readily available, easy to drink water, sits on top of the salt water. And what it does, it allows people here to live. So what happens, and this is a very interesting video. This was taken 2 months after Dorian. Dorian flooded, is a hurricane, flooded our island at about 70%. So 70% of our island was underneath between 1 meter to 10 meters of ocean water. At a certain point, if you looked on a satellite, there was a 30% of our island that was visible. Everything else looked like the ocean. And when it did that, it went through the terrain like the rainwater and displaced our freshwater lens. And so normally when you swim from the freshwater, we're supposed to be as clear as the picture that you saw, into the salt water. There's a little mixing of the two because they sit on top of each other due to density. And this is how much the water was churned right after the hurricane. So again, how much water moved during the hurricane is visible on a simple cave dive. The visibility went from 30 meters plus to a couple of meters, simply because of all this water movement that went through the island. But the fresh water sits on top of the salt water, and the salt water moves with the tides, and the fresh water changes a little bit due to that. And so far, so good. So when I go in the cave, this is actually the demarcation line. So these are stalagmites that come off the ground, and you can easily tell where the fresh water starts and where the salt water meets. The top layer where the decorations are completely white is the freshwater lens. And then the bottom layer where the decorations have the clear demarcation is the salt water. There's a microbial and bacteria that lives into the two and basically creates this waste product. So it's actually very visual where we are in the fresh water and when we're in the salt water. So this is part of when we go cave diving. So again, why all of this is a cave that I connected back in 2012 and has a land-based hole. like the one that I showed you with a freshwater lens, and it actually has an ocean blue hole exit, which is about 300 meters from shore. So it's actually quite a good walk. 300 feet, so about 150 meters from shore, and lives out in the ocean. This was the first ever connection made between specifically a land hole and an ocean blue hole. So I physically swam through with all my gear. And this is kind of like a very good representation. So this is what the hole does. Twice a day for 6 hours, the hole sucks water in. It's what we call siphon. And it goes down, this is the same picture that you saw earlier, and it goes down into about 12 meters of depth and then finds its way underground in the same serpentine that you saw. And so as visible pollutants like plastic drift by in the ocean, as well as invisible pollutants, which could be chemicals, diesel, things that we throw into the ocean, find their way through this siphon and basically discharges it back into the cave. This is another ocean blue hole. In the 2 hour that we did the dive, we laid a line, and within the 2 hours of the dive on the way back, we found all sorts of plastic just wrapped around it. But furthermore, as we're exploring this cave, we actually found plastic that's been there longer than we have ever been. So again, we're exploring, this was once a dry cave. You can see that from the stalactites, stalagmites that formed during that time. And as I'm exploring, I can't reach there. There's actually plastic that has reached far beyond where I can go. And so this is just to show how much these holes transfer to basically not only the small stuff, but also the big stuff. So if it can fit a diver, if it can fit all this plastic, this was, by the way, a poncho that came from a cruise ship. Imagine what they can fit as small particles. So what are the results of all of this? Well, this is what we call a healthy cave. It's a nice, clear visibility. The orange fluff that you see is a microbial growth. So it's technically an animal. It's a unique animal. It lives in an environment with no oxygen, hypoxic environment, no light, no sunlight, so no photosynthesis, and it has the capability of actually live, thrive, and actually expand. So it's a very unique animal that a lot of people want to study. Space, anyone? So, but this is a healthy cave. And then the other cave, do you remember the cave that I showed you that I connected? That is underneath a development. So that's underneath where people live. This is the cave underneath where people live. What is this? This is basically the explosion of the microbial growth due to the increase of nutrients in the water. Where do we see that? We see that sometimes in the ocean when we hear about the red algae bloom, when we hear about there's an explosion of certain animals in certain areas as something has gone out of balance. So the difference between this cave is underneath a protected area and undeveloped. So there's a natural forest with a natural ground. And this is underneath a human settlement with obviously discharges of different kinds. And so once we see this, and then we go back to the water that flows between one and the other, and then we go back to thinking about the shark that swims at the entrance of the caves that I'm about to visit from the ocean, we can start seeing how what I do on top of the cave transfer below the terrain, but then travels through the cave and reaches my mangroves, reaches my estuaries, reaches my bays, and then reaches the fish, the sharks, the corals, and affects the entire system. How to connect all of this? How do we bring all of this to the surface? We have the sharks protected, but protecting the sharks does not mean really protecting the entire ecosystem. So how do we do this? Well, one of the things that we've been doing a lot is bringing more of the caves up to the surface. I don't know if you ever heard the expression out of sight, out of mind. So people are already not very much in love with what's below the surface unless they're divers and they've seen it. But your average person that doesn't put their head below the water, they think, it's okay. And then there's a lot of concept of like, well, what I put in the ocean disappears. So it goes away. It doesn't really go. So one of the things we do is explore these areas and map them. This is the same ocean. Watch the amount of fish that lives at the entrance of these blue holes. So there's a lot of life that depends on the blue holes. We then explore any of these. I'm going to say we as two of us, Kevin Lorenzo and myself, we use pretty much advanced technologies. We're breathers, we're both cave divers, cave explorers, and we lay lines inside these passageways. And then once we've laid the line, we use these, again, low budget, high technology, very much for democratization of science. The more of these we have, the more data we can collect, the more people can work on this, the better it is. And it's called NEMO, and we map the line as we go along. So one of us lays the line, one of us surveys the line, has like color coded, and then we create maps. And now we can say, hey, look, this ocean blue holes is not only off the beach, but it actually reaches back to the beach. So if you were to dig where the hole is, right, it actually, or where the beach is, if you were to create a resort, if you were to damage this area, it will affect the entrance of the hole. It will affect the fish. And in a country like ours, which is also dependent on fishing, it's very important to try to maintain the balance between tourism development, but also why people are coming here, which is the abundance of fish, is the clear water, is the unpolluted areas. So we need to be careful in balancing this out. So this is one of the jobs we do, is mapping like that. But then we do something even more advanced, and we do what it's called interactive map. So on top of the map that we create, I go down with my giant camera and lights and swim every single passageway. This year, thanks to COVID, I think I swam over 40 kilometers of lines underwater, underground. And then I create this video like this. And this video is an overlap with the map. So how does this work? Is somebody who is not a cave diver, they don't want to be a cave diver, they don't like to be a cave diver, they can't be a cave diver, but maybe they're important people into policy making, can have access of what is right below our feet. And so this is when we create the map. Once I've created the video, I then overlap it with the map. And remember, the map also goes over Google Earth. So now I know where I stand, what's below my feet, and this is just a sample. In real life, people can actually pick where they want to look. So I point to the biggest circle here. I know it's a lot of yellow circles, but this big one here in the center, right? When I click play, the circle moves. And it tells me, this is exactly where you're swimming. Out of sight, out of mind is taken away and is brought up to the surface. And through the video, I can actually say, you are standing on this land and this is what right below your feet. Never mind the beauty of the cave, but I can show you how clean it is, how pristine it is, where it goes, where it reaches. So these tunnels, where are they going? Oh, they're going towards the beach. They're going towards the land. Where is the next exit? And so now all of a sudden it surfaces with us. And the other one is we also started to monitor where the water goes, but not only where it goes, but how far it goes and how does it do this. So we buddied up with Dr. Patricia Beddoes and we do flow meters. So as you notice, we don't collect samples, we just collect a little bit of data and images, but these flow meters measure the power of the water going one way and the other. So it can actually measure the tidal changes that we have witnessed, but precisely they're associated with depth meters. So I also associated the difference in pressure and depth, and then can tell us like on a long term what happens into the transition between these two caves. So this is Kevin, my buddy, installing one of these, they're called cave pearls. And this is how we try to make everything connect. One of the things that, one of the biggest inspiration in my life has been like really try to bring to the surface what people don't really know what's down there. One has been sharks, which are protected. And now is the next one. So, for example, this is the Ben's Cave, the one that is into the clean water that you saw. The red rectangular right now is the present park, but the yellow rectangular is actually the proposed area, marine protected area under revision, thanks to the work that Kevin and I have been doing. So we've been swimming, mapping, and taking a video every single tunnel that you see into this map. This is about right now 11 kilometers. So we've been swimming up and down all this line, obviously more than 11 kilometers, collecting everything. And we're hoping to expand. This is the final under revision here. And then we're trying to expand even further with other holes so that all of this is protected. If you notice, there's no construction here. There's a little park where you park. And then below here in the right corner, those are the mangroves. So just protecting all of that really will reach freshwater conservation, the cave itself conservation, the mangroves, and relatively obviously coastline protection, fishing industry, and the sharks. And then what we're doing, we're expanding our work right now only on the island of Grand Bahama. We are locating possible entrances. The red stars are verified entrances that showed the possibility of a cave presence, but we could not physically swim through. So maybe if I was a eel, a sargassum eel, I would have been able to make it through. So there is a verification that there is an entrance. There are some signs that there's a cave, could be stalactites, stalagmites, water movement. However, we couldn't physically get in. The yellow ones are verified entrances, which also have been explored and mapped. And then the purple ones are additional entrances that we have to verify or to explore. To be honest with you, a couple of these purple stars are actually now yellow. So the map has evolved. We've done quite a lot of extensive work. I have to say, COVID was stressful. It actually destroyed completely any source of income, any tourism, any of the parts that I was doing with the people. But it provided an ample amount of time, and thanks to permits that we received through the Bahama National Trust in 2020, not only we discovered 2 new cave systems, but we were able to explore them, map, do an interactive map for a total of over 20 kilometers. And then we were able to verify another 5 to 6 different entrances and do quite a lot of research because we had a lot of time available. And all we had to do is go cave diving, which for us is now very difficult. And all of this, I leave you with, I think my favorite quote. I have a few quotes that I go back, but this is the one that triggers this interconnectivity of water. It says, in the end, we will conserve only what we love. We will love only what we understand. We will understand only what we are taught. And this goes back to, why do I remove hooks from sharks? Because I love the sharks and I want to protect them. And so once I do that, and people ask me, well, how do I protect sharks? And I can explain to them how to do that. And people fall more in love with sharks. And the same is, how do I fall in love with wet rocks, underground, flooded, dark tunnels? How do I fall in love with them? And so that's what we do. We bring them up. We want people to understand the caves and how they work and how they affect us, so that everybody can understand that we are all interconnected with what we do. That the pollution that I create might be far away from the caves in the Bahamas, or it might be away from the coastline. Mind you, you are a part of an ocean nation as well. It will eventually find its way there. And when it finds its way there, it will eventually find its way back to us. Through the ground, like you saw in the polluted cave, through the water that we drink, which is dwindling away in many parts of the world, through the food that we put on our plate. Regardless of the choices we make, we could be vegan and could still be affected by how we are polluting the ground and how the pollution goes through the ground and affects the water. Ultimately affects the water. That waters the vegetables that we eating. So that is where my work basically connects all of these dots. My presentation ends here. I leave you with two websites for you to connect with. My ChristinaZanato.com. If you have questions directly with diving, with training, a little bit of the work I do, by all means. And then if you want to see and read more of all these caves that we have explored, of all the work that we've been doing, shark conservation, the different presentation, you can go on my nonprofit. It's a POWnonprofit.org. There's a page in which underneath exploration, you can actually read more in details all the work that we've been doing. I'm ready for questions.
Thank you for this talk, Christina. We are honored to have you, and we are very happy to be able to listen to you. Now we can have the questions. If you have any questions, please raise your hand or write in the chat. There's a question from Barış Çiftçi. Hello, Christina. Great presentation, and thank you so much for changing the perspective of many people about sharks. My question is, do the sharks you work with show any different reactions to you if you swap your diving gear, or do they recognize you easily? And do you have a favorite shark among them? Thank you.
Very good question. So primarily I dive with them with scuba gear. So I would say it doesn't really change much if I have the chainmail or not. But one of the things that we need to remember that we forget, that we lose underwater, is sense of smell. And sharks is their strongest sense. So I do believe if you think about when you hug someone, when we hugged someone, you also were able to detect a scent. And we know for a fact that we are attracted to certain scents. I'm not talking about perfume, I'm talking about physical scent of someone rather than others. And that's what's called chemistry. So imagine a shark, if their strongest sense is the sense of smell. I do believe that more than visually recognize me, they do a whole recognition based on my smell, based on my heartbeat, based even, I do believe, on my movement, on my demeanor. The way I moves the water and displaces the water different, for example, than another diver. So it's like more, if you are connected with someone, you should be able to recognize their walk, their gait through a crowd. You're like, oh, I know who that person is, and you can recognize them for this. So I do believe sharks do that, but it doesn't really matter if I change gear or not, whatever. I'm free diving or have the chainmail or I don't have the chainmail, they still approach me. As for favorite, I hope they're not listening, but my favorite are some of the older girls, primarily because not all sharks allow me to interact with them or put them to sleep or pet them. So obviously the one that do that are the one that attract a little bit more of my attention. In general, I love them all. I think one of my favorite, her name is Stumpy. The other one was Foggy Eye. I haven't seen Foggy Eye in a couple of years, unfortunately. And they're just very strong female sharks. And yet at the same time, they put themselves in this vulnerable position and say, yeah, I'll lay in your lap and allow you to pet me. It's not a forceful behavior. They can leave anytime they want. And so I kind of like have a soft spot for them.
And there's another question from Kerem Kurnaz. He says, thank you for this enjoyable presentation. My question is, when you look after these sharks and rescue them, does this create any disturbance in their lives in terms of their immigration and such?
Very good question. So if you remember during my presentation, I said one size does not fit all. So I don't do this kind of work with all the sharks. Also because of that, Caribbean reef sharks are not migratory sharks, so they don't move from the area. They swim deep, but then during the day they hang around in the same area. But we also monitor through our recording of who the sharks are, their mating season. So We know for a fact when they go mating and when they come back, they also present biting marks from the males trying to hang on to them. We know which one are pregnant, when they disappear and when they come back. So based on all that work, we know that the interactions and the work we do with the sharks does not affect them, because they still go ahead and do what is necessary to be done from a natural cycle point of view. Same as, for example, if a hurricane comes, it doesn't matter if I'm there, the sharks go into their hurricane preparedness mode. So we can attest that that has not changed. COVID was a great proof of what I'm saying, because during COVID, we had our country locked us down. This is an island. It was some of the toughest months of my life. We could not even go to the beach nor go out on a boat. And so I could not literally go and see the sharks. The sharks live, I know they can take care of themselves. And when we went back, the sharks were all there. Nobody had suffered from our lack of presence. So it was very good to see that human interactions helps them, but obviously nobody was out there fishing. The sharks were not really injured, and we were not out there, and the sharks went ahead and continued their lives.
Hello, I would like to ask something. Firstly, thank you for everything you shared. My question is, have you experienced a dangerous situation with the sharks you usually work with, not the new ones, but the ones you spend time with mostly?
So this goes back to what is dangerous. So is there an inherent danger working with animals that are, compared to us in the water, one, extremely powerful? At the same time, they have 2 to 15 rows of teeth. Yes, it is dangerous, but so is dangerous climbing a wall without wearing a harness and having your nails inside the rocks. So it's an inherent danger due to their nature, as is dangerous when I play with my 70 kilos dog. If he actually jumps, he's trained not to jump on me, because if he jumps on me, he's going to knock me on the ground. So is that dangerous? In a certain way, yes, right? So working with sharks is dangerous because they have 2 to 15 rows of teeth, and they're very powerful animal. And if they turn, they can actually knock me off or anything like that. But they do not display a dangerous behavior, if that's what you're asking. I wear a chainsuit to avoid what we call accidental bites or abrasion, cuts and scrapes, but they don't intentionally do that. They don't bite on intention. They don't come in and trying to bite. There's videos that I haven't showed, but you can see like they swim around me and they never bite. So it is part of being in the water with these animals that has dangers, but I never felt in danger with them, if that answers your question. I always feel extremely comfortable, extremely confident of their behaviors, what they're doing, why they're doing. And this includes not only the sharks I work with, but here in the Bahamas, we dive with bull sharks. We dive with tiger sharks, with lemons, with great hammerheads. When I'm in the water with them, it's very noticeable what is their behavior and what they do. So no, I never felt in danger.
Hello, thank you very much for the presentation. I had a shark dive in Bahamas, and when I decided for that dive, I quite hesitated, whether it's like ecologically the right thing to do because of the, like the animal behavior, are we going to affect them, etc. So what's your thinking about that? Because from what I understand, you also do such dives as well, right? So where we were like, say, 15 tourists just sitting on a rack, and the sharks were all around while someone was feeding them. Do such trips or such tourism change shark behavior? I'm pretty sure you have a couple of accidents, etc., in such dives as well, right? So I was just curious, what are your thoughts about those commercialization of shark diving?
I have to say you're absolutely incorrect. What people have been bitten while watching a shark dive? I haven't heard the news about that. So, and you were down there as well. So is there an inherent danger for the feeder? Yes, that's the reason why the feeder is wearing protection. And if they're not wearing protection, then we need to talk about how people do procedures. But people that have been watching shark dives in the Bahamas, we don't have a record of those kind of accidents, specifically on a shark feeding dives. Furthermore, there's very much proof, 30 years of my life, 27, not 30, of people that come on these organized shark dives, and then we go down and dive with the sharks without the organized shark dives, without protection, with all the people. So does it affect the sharks' behavior? Yes, it makes them a little bit more comfortable with people. And that is one of the reasons why we started with the shark dives and the shark tourism. It also drops the level of fear of, oh my God, I'm going in the water with sharks, and as soon as I hit the water, sharks will come and bite me. And actually sharks very much ignore people because they have 8 senses by which they can go, oh yeah, oh, you don't have any food, I really don't care about you. And so it brings sharks closer to people, people closer to sharks, and actually kind of like helps very much dispel quite a lot of the myths about the behavior, the wrong behavior that we instill into sharks. One of which is, as soon as we hit the water, sharks will be attracted to us, they will come to us, they will bite people. There are dozens of operators spread all throughout the Bahamas that work with oceanic white-tip, tigers, bulls, great hammerheads, Caribbean reef sharks that can attest on bringing people in the water doing these dives, and then bring people in the water doing regular dives and still being able to see the same animals without incidents. As I said in my previous answer, is we monitor their behavior. So when it's time to mate, they go and mate. They don't care if humans are there or not. They'll disappear for 2 to 3 weeks and do what they need to do. Is it 100% correct? Perhaps not, right? We're going in and in a certain way, introducing something that is a connection, an interaction with humans. But I'm hoping for the day where having to do these dives and the educational programs won't be necessary, because the sharks are protected all over the world, because the sharks are not fished and finned, and because people do realize the value of these animals alive rather than dead. Economically, makes sense. In the Bahamas, which is a fishing country, we have been able to turn the value of live sharks over dead sharks. So instead of making $1,000 on a dead shark, you can actually make $30,000 a year over a live shark. And it might not be the most noble of the reasons, but when I can convince local people to actually utilize live sharks on a repetition rather than going out and fish them out of the water once, because once is fished, that actually has a waterfall effect, if you think about it, right? So now we're not fishing the sharks, we're protecting them. Well, the sharks maintain the balance of the fish. They also maintain the balance of the seagrass. They maintain the balance of the mangroves. And who benefits from it? Well, the conch and the lobsters and the turtles benefit from it, but ultimately on top of that, there's the humans that benefit from it. So my view is that they are useful, that they are good. We still go back. One size does not fit all. I do believe there are operators out there that are absolutely not careful and not taking care of 3 important points. I think these dives needs to be done with 3 things in mind: the safety of the people watching it, the safety of the staff involved, and the safety of the sharks. And then this comes with operational procedures. This comes with mindfulness of wearing protection for the person, for example, that is handling the shark, or specific positioning of the people, safety divers, so that everything can be continuously done. During COVID, these activities were interrupted. When people started going diving again, the sharks did not attack or eat the people. This is a further proof that provisioning sharks on not regular basis, but like on a random basis, does not cause dependence. And the sharks are still doing their thing. And one of the reasons why is the sharks are, even at the apex level, what we call cleaners. So a shark will go after that is dead, dying, decaying, injured. So if they have to pick between a healthy swimming turtle, fish, anything that they eat, and something that is served, they'll go after something that is served. But if it's not served, they'll go back to what is their nature.
And there's another question from Dua Kayra Kahraman. She firstly says, thank you very much. And then asks, do you remember how you felt the first time you met with or saw a shark? Were you always fascinated by sharks?
I was fascinated by sharks since I was a kid. I saw a movie where this person could actually swim with sharks thanks to the power of a medallion that he was wearing. Pretty sure kitsch movie, but this was 1978, so this was like at the tail end of Jaws, and it was a movie in which this person will go to extremes to protect his sharks. And I decided one day I will be swimming with sharks. I will have sharks for friends. And my first encounter with sharks was at age 22, so a little few years later. That is when I was able to come here to the Bahamas to become certified, and my first open water checkout dive was in the same area where I'm working right now, and there were Caribbean reef sharks. And the best encounter that I remember, and I think the most valuable and the one that repeats itself and never loses in that emotional status, is when there are two. One is when I hit the water and I just see the sharks below me, and they come up or they swim down and they swim with us on the dive, any regular dive. And the second one is when a shark comes into my lap. So when she comes into my lap and stops swimming, she naturally sinks down to the bottom and then starts ventilating, which is basically she pumps water through her gills, or through a system called buccal pumping, and I can feel her jaw moving up and down on my lap, and then slowly I can feel her weight like becoming heavier and heavier and heavier, and there's like this total abandonment for whatever could be 30 seconds up to 40, 50 minutes. I had sharks sitting in my lap for up to 50 minutes in this, yeah, I trust you, I'll sit here and it's okay. So those are for me the most two amazing moments with sharks.
And there is another question from Osman Burakçevik. He says, hi, Christina, beautiful presentation. I have a question. Assuming you are visiting the sharks frequently, 4 days a week, for example, do sharks behave when you skip a week?
Yes, they do. We skipped the months. Remember, we skipped months during COVID, and they just went ahead and did their own thing. When we went back down, they just kind of like swam towards us a little bit. It's kind of like, where have you been? But absolutely, they didn't change in their behavior when we went back diving the first time, even after Dorian, because after Dorian, we didn't dive for 2 or 3 months. When we went back, it was more like, it's about time you came back. Where have you been? But they don't really change much of a behavior if we skip. And that is the good part. To be honest with you, if I notice that our presence and our lack of presence would affect their behavior to that level where they become, as someone else, as the person before was asking, do they become potentially dangerous? Then I will be the first one to revisit my practices. I will be the first one to say, okay, we need to review this and we might have to stop this, because it's something that we constantly monitor, we log, we pay attention to.
And there's another question from Kerem Kurnaz again. He asks, how do you approach these caves at first? I mean, when this cave is unexplored, how do you make progress in these caves when some of them are very complex?
Very good question. It's a long one. So when you become a cave diver, you receive extensive training, you have special gear. And one of the first things you do is you start swimming through tunnels that other people have swum through before. And we follow a guideline. There's a little guideline. It's called Ariane's line, the guideline. And you follow these lines and you learn how to navigate your way back from the cave. And that's what I did. When I became a cave diver, all I did is follow somebody else's lines. As you do that, you acquire memories, you acquire knowledge, your brain start collecting information. So you swim down the line, but then the brain collects that this line does this, and this cave looks like that. And then The cave might have, oh, look, this line goes down into the ground and that line goes up into that. So you collect data into your brain and you kind of like don't realize it. So when you start exploring, that data is there. So I didn't start exploring the day after I became a cave diver. The day after I became a cave diver, I took several years of cave diving where other people had been. Then I also decided to become a cave instructor, but people can be cave explorer without being cave instructor. When I was swimming down these lines, then at a certain point, I would look at the cave and think, there is something there that nobody has noticed. Different is when you approach a new hole. So when you approach a new hole, we start with the guideline outside of the water. So we can actually know where to pop our head through. And as we go down, we lay the line in, usually what is the path of least resistance. So if I'm going in a brand new cave and I go in, like Niflheim was, the entrance was small, but when I arrived down in the tunnel, it was like a big tunnel, another big tunnel on a small. By nature, I'm going down the big tunnel first. And then when the big tunnel ends or the big tunnel becomes small, I may come back. And I'm like, I tie you into the line again, we mark our way out and I go down the next big tunnel. And as you do that, your brain collects more data and it starts saying, well, this new cave is a shape like this. When the rocks do this, chances are that. And so you start looking, and we're in a three-dimensional work. So you start looking, it's like, does the cave go through the ceiling? Does the cave go through the ground? And each time you keep leaving lines behind. So we go in, we lay a certain amount, we map it, come out. The higher risk in cave diving are loss of visibility and losing the line that you have in your hand. There's another misconception, for example, very few caves, especially where we are, especially if they're flooded, have a risk of collapse. There are some morphological, geological things inside some caves that make the ceiling brittle when we exhale bubbles. That's the reason why right now we're actually working on rebreathers. So we try to exhale also less bubbles, and that might dislodge some of the pieces of the ceiling. But that is, again, something specific that we can recognize, and it's usually fossilized reef. So when I'm swimming under a ceiling that is made of fossilized reef, I know the bubbles might dislodge chunks of the reef and they might fall on the ground. So the risks with low visibility, losing the line, are mitigated by our training and our experience. But how we decide is usually follow the path of least resistance. When the paths of least resistance is finished, we start going smaller and smaller and squeezing and smaller as we go along.
And there's another question from Elif Yeşim Özoral. She says, hi, Christina. Thank you so much for the amazing presentation. I would like to hear your thoughts about cage dive, which is very popular nowadays.
So cage dives are usually elected for what are the largest predatory fish, which would be the gray whites. Why cages are used is to protect the people as well as to protect the animals. Their controversy that came from cage diving came on the fact that sharks become damaged by the cage. And we go back to the 3 points. I need to protect the people, I need to protect the stuff, I need to protect the sharks. When cage diving is done correctly, sharks should not impact the cage. When sharks impact the cage, there's something to be analyzed on how the operator handled the cage diving. So does it make all cage diving bad? No. Does it make that specific operator to be analyzed and be tested and look what they're doing? Yes. I do believe that for now we prove people wrong. When I started in '94, tiger shark diving didn't exist. And the concept was that if you went to feed the tiger sharks, they will turn around and eat people. We now have Tiger Beach on this island, and we take thousands of people in the water diving with tiger sharks, and we proved the theory wrong. Same as we proved that feeding sharks, then afterwards they eat people. We proved that wrong. With great whites, proving that is a little bit tricky, because one bite out of a great white, it could be fatal. So how do you mitigate is you put people in the cage. They watch these large predatory sharks who are one of the few actually that feed on animals our size and our shape. We need to keep that in consideration. The Caribbean reef sharks doesn't eat on animals our size and our shapes. They eat fish. They eat like dead stuff. They go after, you know, like if a dolphin is dead, they'll take little chunks out of the dolphin, but the dolphin has to be dead. The great white hunts on animals our size. Have there been people that have been scuba diving, free diving, swimming the great whites out of the cage? Yes. Is it possible? Absolutely. Do I want to commercialize it? Because the moment I commercialize it, and that is where shark diving, you know, like we're talking about cage diving, is I will take Joe Brown or John Doe, as they call it in American. I have no idea of the background, and it can have 600, 7,000 dives or whatever it is, but I still don't know how they will react in the water. And I will say, yes, let's go scuba diving with great whites without a cage. And that I open a window of danger for the person, for the staff having to handle the person, and ultimately for the sharks. How do we break that barrier? I don't know. We have broken the barrier. People go scuba diving with great whites without a cage, but they are a certain kind of people and a certain kind of diver and a certain kind of person that maybe understands the sharks. I think to go in the water with a predatory shark of that size, we really, really, really need to understand it for ourselves. We cannot rely on the dive guide going, oh, you know, it's actually showing some. So that's where the cage becomes good. But the cage needs to be managed for the safety of the sharks.
Are there any other questions? Okay.
Sorry, I would like to ask you a question. First of all, thank you for your presentation, Christina. It was very good. I wonder, do you think that a person with claustrophobia can learn to overcome their fears? And have you ever confronted with a case like this before?
Luckily, I don't suffer claustrophobia. I've been in places where to go through, I had to remove the helmet because my head wouldn't fit with the helmet on. So I literally came through a hole where I had to kind of like move the head in order to make it fit through. It's incredible what you can do with the body, but the head doesn't really move. Can people overcome the fear of claustrophobia? Absolutely. I do believe people can overcome their fears when they confront them. I think I have my fears. My two biggest fears are being struck by a lightning. One, because I was struck before, and it was extremely painful. I don't wish to repeat that again. And the other one is heights. I have an extreme fear of heights. And specifically, I have a fear of heights for ladders. If you imagine a ladder that you put like either against the wall, for example, I have a fear when I'm top of the ladder and there's a little 10 meters void below me. The more you climb that ladder, the more I climb that ladder, the least the fear. Right now, the lightning, for example, because it comes from a negative experience, I have what it's called post-traumatic stress disorder on it. It takes a little longer. So I actually have boundaries by which I cannot be in a lightning storm. But with time, from the time I got struck to now, I actually able to gauge, oh, wow, yeah, that strike of lightning is so far away. I'm still okay. I don't hyperventilate anymore. So can we win some of this? Yes, absolutely. With time, with patience with ourselves, and with a lot of forgiveness. And then with practice, right? So a little bit of guided practice, nice and slow. Will this person with claustrophobia ever be able to be maybe a full cave explorer? Maybe yes, maybe not. But I think the best way to win our fears is to confront them.
Is there any other questions you would like to ask? If not, I'm going to continue. Thank you so much again, Christina, for being with us and share your knowledge with us.
Thank you.
I'm going to call our executive board president, Sinem Kurnaz, to give her speech. Sinem.
Thank you, Ecenaz, and thank you, Christina, again for your amazing presentation. Hello, everyone, again. First of all, I would like to thank our valuable speakers for their contribution to our conference on behalf of myself and our society, SUS. Thank you very much for your support, enlightening speeches, and efforts to our conference. I hope this conference has been productive and enjoyable for me as well as for you, our valuable participants. I hope this kind of conferences will continue in the coming years. Yes, I know I have always spoken on behalf of the executive board, but as SUS, we have a Sudan Meseleler crew behind the scenes that plays a very important role to be able to make this conference real. I want to thank them in front of you. They have worked very hard for months to make this conference real, and I believe they have created a very good event. Thank you very much for your efforts. I would also thank to all our participants from all over the world. Thank you for not leaving us alone today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sinem. Lastly, for wrap up and to summarize what Sinem said, we are very thankful to the participants for being with us today, for their fruitful questions and comments, and wishing you to see next year.
Can we take a photo with you? If it's okay for you.
Christina, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear. I didn't know you were asking me. Sure. Yes.
Okay, then who is taking the photo? Okay, I done.
I did too.
Okay, that's okay, I think. Okay, thank you again, Christina, for joining us today. It was a great pleasure for us to meet with you and talk with you. That's all I can say.
Thank you. Never be afraid to reach out if you have more questions.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Güzel mesajlarınız için teşekkür ediyorum arkadaşlar. Bugün aramızda olan herkese de tek tek teşekkür ederim. Bizim için çok önemli bir etkinlikti. Umarım sizler de memnun kalmışsınızdır. O zaman seneye görüşmek üzere diyelim bence. Ne dersin Naz?
Evet, bir de Türkçesini söyleyeyim.
Ama bu sefer yüz yüze görüşmek dileğiyle. Pandemi bizi yeterince yordu zaten. Biz teşekkür ederiz. Çok sağ olun katıldığınız için. Biz teşekkür ediyoruz. Çok sağ olun. Keremcim, anında geleceğim. Sen yeter ki git. Teşekkür ederiz Eren. Çok sağ ol katıldığın için. Sizlerin katılımıyla böyle güzelleşti. O zaman izninizle ben meetingimizi sonlandırıyorum. Seneye yüz yüze görüşmek dileğiyle. Ah, Erman abi yazdı. Çok teşekkür ederiz Erman abi. Sizleri aramızda görmek bizim için çok büyük bir zevkti. Çok sağ olun. Teşekkür ederim. Evet, umuyoruz ki artık bir sonraki buluşmamız su altında veya yüz yüze olur. Gerçekten biz de artık bu pandeminin arayı böyle açmasından çok sıkıldık. Umuyoruz ki kısa sürede her şey eskiye döner. Çok teşekkür ederiz. Aynen, Kayra'nın dediği gibi kendinize cici bakın. Çok teşekkür ederiz. Elimizden geldiğince sizleri memnun etmeye çalıştık. O zaman tekrardan herkese katılımları için teşekkür ediyorum ve bu meetingi sonlandırıyorum. Görüşmek üzere. Kendinize çok iyi bakın.